Colin Hall is the last man standing in humanity's final burning fortress. A massive explosion rips through the battlefield, a final show of overwhelming power, leaving our hero on his knees, barely able to breathe from the sheer force of it all. Across the rubble, the demon lord taunts him, pointing out he's the only one left alive, a smug, horned figure who calls out Colin's name with absolute confidence. Colin gets blasted back, hitting the ground hard as the demon's attack connects. But even bloodied and broken, his eyes burn with a cold, defiant light. This demon lord admits he is impressed Colin kept fighting even after becoming the last one, and as a reward he will graciously let Colin choose how he wants to die. Colin's glowing eyes widen as the reality of his situation finally sinks in. This is really where it all ends for him and for humanity. This story flashes back a year to the day the demon race first invaded. When they stormed through cities and even took the royal capital with shocking speed. This common soldiers fought back as hard as they could, but they were completely outmatched, because against these magic-using monsters, humanity was basically helpless. Turns out, magic was a privilege reserved only for nobles with so-called superior blood, and these bloodline supremacists were ready to show everyone their power. They genuinely believed they were the destined heroes, casting a massive spell to save the day, unleashing a volley of what looked like incredibly powerful magic upon the demon army, only for it to fizzle out into nothing, revealing just how useless their proud magic truly was. Turns out, the nobles' ultimate magic was nothing more than child's play to the demons, a possibility that these arrogant mages never even considered for a second. As their own grand spell is effortlessly turned back on them in a fiery blast, this lead noble can only stare in horror as his entire strategy literally blows up in his face. This whole tragedy flashes through Colin's mind while he kneels in the rubble, making him bitterly regret not finding a certain mysterious book much sooner, because he is convinced that if he had, none of this would have ever happened. Snapping back to the present, the demon lord asks if he has finally decided how he wants to die. He even offers a few gruesome suggestions just to rub it in, but Colin has had enough of the villain monologue for one lifetime. He realizes at this point he has no choice but to use that asterisk final option, which leaves the demon lord momentarily confused by his sudden shift in attitude, right before Colin draws his sword and charges, screaming at him to shut the hell up. His steel clashes against the demon's flaming blade, which was summoned without any effort at all, and Colin immediately feels the overwhelming difference in their raw strength. This demon lord easily overpowers him, sending him flying back with a single brutal kick, but Colin lands on his feet, still glaring with pure, unbroken defiance. Annoyed, the demon starts gathering a massive amount of energy into his hands. Mocking Colin for thinking that mere swordsmanship could ever hope to defeat him, he laughs, revealing that humans without the demon god's blessing are utterly powerless. This demon lord is suddenly reeling in shock, not understanding what just happened, because for the first time a human has actually managed to wound him. Colin clarifies that normal swordsmanship would never have worked, gripping his blade as it glows with a dangerous blue light. He reveals that this power comes at a cost, paid with his own soul and life force, which fuels a forbidden sword technique that changes the entire game. With that, Colin leaps forward for another high-speed clash, and the demon lord thinks he has found an opening in the attack, but it is a feint, letting Colin slice clean through his arm. This demon lord roars in pain, but his expression is pure rage, not defeat. He catches Colin's blade with his bare hand, stopping the follow-up attack instantly. Smirking, he admits the forbidden sword technique is impressive, but taunts Colin, saying a different move might have actually worked. Unfortunately for our hero, cracks begin to spiderweb across his sword, as the demon lord declares he was still one step short, shattering the blade. Now completely disarmed, Colin can only stare up at his opponent, who sends him flying back with a single devastating blow. Colin crashes hard into the ruins, his last-ditch effort having failed. He realizes that even giving it his all was not enough to win, as the demon lord picks him up, mocking that sacrificing an arm was the best humanity could do. As his life fades, Colin can only apologize to the comrades he could not save, finally admitting to himself that he is lost as the demon lord grins in victory. With our hero completely at his mercy, the demon lord delivers the final blow, but as Colin's blood drips down, it lands on something strange in the rubble, activating a massive magic circle that erupts in a blinding flash of light. He is suddenly pulled from the brink of death, completely confused by what is happening, wondering how in the world he is even still alive after all that. He finds himself standing alone in a strange, ethereal space with no idea where he is, and as he looks around the empty void, he realizes he is not entirely alone. So he whirls around, demanding to know who else is there with him. His eyes widen in pure shock at the impossible sight before him, because floating in the darkness is that mysterious book he regretted not finding sooner. He cannot believe it, recognizing it as an incredibly powerful magic tome, and a voice from the book explains that his blood was the key to awakening its power. It then offers him the one thing he wants most, a chance to go back and redo everything. Colin is understandably skeptical, having no clue what this entity even is. But the thought of actually getting a second chance is too good to pass up. He realizes that if this is real, it is the ultimate opportunity for his revenge. This book seems pleased with his answer, promising to remain by his side from now on, offering to teach him the magic he needs to finally fulfill his long-cherished wish. This book's power surges around Colin as he makes his choice, fully accepting the deal to go back and rewrite history. his eyes burning with resolve as he demands to see the other future, this one where he gets his goddamn revenge. He is suddenly ripped from that void, waking up to a crowd chanting butcher, and finds himself in the body of a gladiator staring down a massive opponent. This guy roars while swinging a hammer that is bigger than Colin's entire torso, dropping our hero into a slave arena with nothing but a basic sword and shield. Colin barely manages to avoid the first brutal swing from the giant. A cold sweat breaking out as he processes just how bad his starting position is. Meanwhile, the crowd is absolutely loving it, screaming for more action, and up in the stands, a noble named Viscount Slaith seems impressed Colin's still standing. This guy smirks, explaining that the whole point of the lowborn is to serve as entertainment for their betters, no different from slaves, which makes Colin realize this noble sees no difference between them at all. Because their only purpose is to be pawns in his game, a point the butcher emphasizes with another smash. This nobles in the crowd are having the time of their lives, laughing at the spectacle, while the common folk are just as bloodthirsty, chanting for the butcher to finish him, and Slaith himself looks on with a particularly nasty grin, enjoying the view of Colin about to be flattened in the middle of the arena. Slaith is still enjoying the show, but Colin's focus is entirely on his opponent. Confirming that yep, he is definitely back in the past, which leaves the butcher a little confused by his sudden change in attitude. Colin realizes he's been sent back to his days as a slave gladiator and feels a magic circle on his chest, realizing the tome merged with his body. If that is the case, then he actually has a real shot this time around, so with a burst of newfound power, he dodges the next swing, declaring that from this moment forward, he is changing his own damn fate. This butcher can only stare in absolute disbelief, as Colin lands a clean strike right across his chest, sending the giant stumbling back for the very first time. Colin knows that to prevent humanity's destruction by the demons, he cannot just rely on his old skills while the crowd goes absolutely wild. He has to master all the magic sealed inside that ancient tome. Of course, as a slave, that is basically a pipe dream, so first things first. He needs to find a way out of this miserable arena. And his plan is to somehow get into the service of Marquis Darius Hall. He vows to make it happen, and this time much sooner than before. Just then, an old man in the stands gets his attention, explaining that all the commoners bet on him to beat the butcher who the nobles favor. That old man rushes over, begging Colin to throw the match because he is terrified of Slaith, pleading with him to lose on purpose, because if he does not, the old man will be the one to face the Viscount's wrath. This just confirms Colin's theory that Slaith is using him to manipulate the other nobles' bets, so having made his decision, he stands over the butcher's defeated form, and with a wild grin, demands they send out the next opponent immediately. Of course, the nobles who bet on the butcher are absolutely losing their minds, screaming about the massive sums of money they just lost on the supposedly sure thing. Slaith's right-hand man frantically tries to calm them all down, insisting this shocking upset is actually all part of the Viscount's master plan. Elsewhere, Marquis Darius Hall comments on how powerful and precise Colin's last strike was, prompting Slaith to smugly take all the credit, saying Colin was his best slave after all. Down in the arena, Colin is already clashing with his next opponent without a moment's rest, as Slaith explains his real plan is to build the hype and get them to bet even bigger. His man assures the fuming nobles that everything is proceeding exactly as designed, promising that next time they will see Colin get absolutely torn to shreds for sure. Only that does not happen. Colin pulls off another impossible win and the crowd goes wild for him. Slaith is left completely speechless, his entire scheme blowing up in his face. This other nobles immediately turn on him, accusing him of setting them up to be cheated. Now Slaith is sweating, totally baffled as he tries to figure out what Colin's game is. Slaith is absolutely livid, screaming for all the gladiators to be brought out at once, while Marquis Darius Hall watches the chaos unfold, finding the whole thing rather amusing. Down below, a whole new wave of fighters is shoved into the arena to face Colin, who remembers how in his first life he never managed to reach the Marquis. But this time, he is confident he has the power to actually pull it off. He knows just winning will not be enough to get into House Hall, though, so he decides he might as well put on a real show for everyone, challenging the entire group to come at him at the same time, and the crowd loses its mind. This gladiators do not need to be told twice, charging him from all sides, but Colin just calmly waits for them, completely unfazed by the numbers. He effortlessly dodges a massive axe swing that shatters the stone floor, leaping clean over their heads while the other gladiators just stare in shock. They cannot even process how he moved that fast, leaving them wide open, and Colin immediately capitalizes, taking one of them down in a flash of steel. This next wave comes at him with spears, trying to pin him down, but he just stops a mace with his foot like it is nothing. Using the blocked weapon as a springboard, he launches himself forward, cutting straight through the spear wielders before they can even react. This last remaining gladiator roars and swings his huge sword down at him, and Colin just gives him a dead-eyed stare, ready for the next move. Instead of dodging, Colin catches the massive blade with his bare hands, channeling his new power to completely halt the attack, and then shatters the sword with a single empowered strike. With every gladiator defeated, the entire stadium is left in stunned silence, especially Viscount Slaith. Colin then hurls the broken hilt right past the Viscount's head, smashing it into the wall behind him as a very clear message. Slaith is absolutely terrified, realizing that was no accident, while Colin just stands there having dominated the entire arena. Now completely humiliated, Slaith swears he will make Colin pay for making a fool of him. This other nobles look on as Marquis Hall smirks at the chaos, remarking how Slaith's little betting scheme has completely fallen apart. One of the other nobles insists Slaith has to execute Colin for this public defiance, especially since he dared to challenge a noble in front of Marquis Darius Hall. This Marquis just scoffs at their so-called common sense, leaving the lesser nobles sweating under his gaze. Just then, another powerful noble steps forward to confront the Marquis directly, summoning his own magic as he questions Hall's ideals. He starts lecturing about how magic was a gift from God 1,000 years ago, which established a divine hierarchy with nobles as God's chosen agents. He then accuses the Marquis of having a twisted ideology for not upholding this sacred order. Colin just scoffs at the whole divine right speech, clearly unimpressed, and Marquis Hall asks what is so wrong with that ideology being challenged, shocking the other nobles. They immediately lose it, screaming about how a lowborn slave dares to mock God's will. That is when Colin steps up, drawing his sword and calling out Viscount Slaith by name, challenging the Viscount to fight him personally if he is so sure he is God's agent, which sends the entire crowd into a frenzy, certain our boy has just signed his own death warrant. Even the other nobles cannot believe the sheer audacity of a slave challenging one of them. Marquis Hall, however, seems to be the only one actually enjoying this turn of events. Slaith finally steps forward, seething at the wretched slave standing before him, accusing Colin of ruining his plans and mocking God while gathering magic in his hands. With a roar, he unleashes his power, absolutely furious about being challenged to a duel. Just then, the magic tome inside Colin activates, detecting the incoming power, and a status window pops up, revealing Slaith is just a beginner with low aptitude. Slaith, completely oblivious, promises to send Colin to the afterlife for his insolence, while Colin just stands there watching the attack build with a look of total calm. This Viscount then launches a massive vortex of wind straight at him, a spell Marquis Hall immediately recognizes as the deadly wind edge. This gets the other nobles excited as they start betting on how many pieces Colin will be cut into. This swirling blades of wind close in on Colin, ready to tear him apart. As Slaith screams for Darius to watch, claiming this proves the power gap between a noble and a slave. Colin just smirks, recognizing the spell as nothing more than beginner-level wind magic, and his new status window confirms he now has magic resistance thanks to the tome, which means Slaith's big attack is basically useless against him now. He is actually pretty pleased this unexpected ability is already proving its worth, because compared to actual demon magic, this is an absolute joke. And he shouts that an attack this weak is nothing to him. Slaith is completely stunned by the sheer disrespect from a mere slave, and the other nobles are just as shocked by his audacity. Without a moment's hesitation, Colin charges straight through the wind vortex, leaving Slaith screaming that it is impossible as he emerges totally unharmed. Before the Viscount can even process what is happening, Colin is right on top of him, landing a powerful strike that sends the noble's sword flying from his hand. This blow connects cleanly, knocking the wind right out of the Viscount and sending him crashing to the arena floor, utterly defeated. But just as he has won, the tome inside him detects another source of magic power nearby. Suddenly, a massive purple magic circle erupts from the ground beneath him, as shadowy, skeletal hands shoot up from the dirt to grab his legs. More of them burst forth, wrapping around his arms and body, restraining him completely, and he struggles against the magical bindings, unable to break free. Just as a group of knights arrives, announcing they are responding to a report. This lead knight confirms Colin's accused of defying a noble and insulting God, placing him under arrest in God's name as his men surround the restrained fighter. Turns out these guys are the Divine Guard, an elite unit from the Magic Tower, an organization created specifically to uphold the supremacy of noble bloodlines. They are made up of the most powerful nobles, far above the usual rabble. Colin knows he could easily break these magical restraints if he wanted to, but he does not want to reveal his full hand to the powers that be just yet. Realizing it is an all-or-nothing moment, he decides to make a massive gamble, and with a huge shout, he starts to announce his identity. Claiming he is Colin Hall, the son of Marquis Darius Hall, demanding his release. This immediately throws the knights into a panic, realizing who they might have just captured. Even the other nobles are completely floored by the sudden revelation, since nobody in the crowd has ever heard of the Marquis having another son. Colin just stands there calmly, banking on the fact the Divine Guard never touches true nobles. Now he just has to wait and see how this incredibly risky bluff plays out. But the noble who lectured him earlier is not buying it, drawing his sword, screaming that impersonating a noble is a crime worthy of immediate execution as he attacks. Just before the blade can connect, a powerful voice shouts for him to wait, and it is none other than Marquis Darius Hall himself making a grand entrance. This attacking noble freezes, stammering that he was just about to dispose of the insolent slave. Marquis Hall grabs Colin by the throat, yelling about how he has disgraced the family name, which leaves the Divine Guard completely stunned and confused by this sudden family drama, and the other noble who was about to attack is just as lost by the turn of events. This Marquis tightens his grip, lecturing Colin about how he was supposed to have learned his lesson, but instead of changing his ways, he just went and caused even more trouble. Specifically by getting into a fight with Viscount Slaith, which was apparently a very bad move. Colin just smirks through it all, thinking to himself that this whole bet is one that he is absolutely going to win no matter what. At that moment, Marquis Hall turns his attention to the defeated Viscount Slaith, offering a formal apology for all the trouble his foolish son has caused him, but Colin tries to argue back, shouting that Slaith was the one who started it, only to be immediately shut down by a furious silence from the Marquis, who then informs the Divine Guard that he will be handling his son's discipline personally, before casually dismissing everyone and telling them the show is over. This other noble is not having any of it though, shouting for them to stop, screaming at Darius Hall that he absolutely cannot just let Colin go, because he is not falling for this ridiculous act and refuses to let a slave be taken away. Vowing to finish Colin off right here and now, no matter what anyone says, and with that he charges forward, sword ready to strike, while Colin just watches him come with a completely unimpressed smirk. Colin just smirks, pointing out the noble said he'd attack no matter what anyone says, and he asks if that includes the Lord of the Rhine territory standing right there, or maybe even the Divine Guard who came to arrest him in God's name. He completely flips the man's own words back on him, basically accusing the guy of planning to rebel against both the Lord and the Guard. This sends the noble into a full-blown panic, dropping his sword while stammering that is not what he meant. At that moment, the skeletal hands binding Colin's legs begin to release their grip, as the lead knight steps forward, declaring this whole thing was just a misunderstanding. He even offers a formal apology for his behavior before announcing they will be leaving now. Before they go, though, the knight turns his attention to a very nervous Viscount Slaith, informing him that a full report of this entire incident will be filed with the Magic Tower. Slaith is told he will be notified of his punishment later, which leaves him absolutely terrified. Colin finally lets out a sigh of relief, his massive gamble having paid off perfectly. As the Divine Guard marches away, the lead knight tells his subordinates they need a detailed report on Colin. One of them asks if he means the Marquis's son, still buying the story, while another wonders how the powerful lord could have a secret child nobody knew about. This lead knight, however, reveals he does not believe for a second that Colin is the Marquis's son. His subordinates are confused, pointing out how calm Colin was and that the Marquis is clearly protecting him. Their leader admits it is a strange situation, ordering them to keep Colin under surveillance for now. With their orders given, the Divine Guard officially departs from the arena. With the arena chaos behind them, Marquis Hall's carriage travels through the countryside, carrying him and his newly acquired son away from the scene, and the Marquis cannot help but laugh, praising Colin for the incredible performance he just put on. Inside, the two of them sit across from each other in a tense silence, until Colin finally speaks up, thanking the Marquis for his help back there, revealing that Darius Hall even had his butler buy out his slave contract, officially making him a free man. This Marquis then gets serious, asking Colin if he has ever been on a real battlefield, pointing out that his movements were far too polished for a simple slave, more like a seasoned warrior. Colin begins to tell a story about being born in a remote village and sold into slavery by his own people, claiming a certain noble eventually bought him and taught him the fundamentals of magic and combat, treating him like a son and giving him a purpose he never had before. He explains that this man entrusted him with a great ideal, but in the end he failed to achieve it, so now no matter what, he is determined to live up to that man's expectations, swearing he will succeed even if it costs him his own life. This Marquis listens intently, realizing this explains Colin's magic resistance and his unyielding spirit, and he starts to believe that if anyone can help him, it is this young man, seeing a reflection of his own ambitions in Colin's fierce determination, just as an attendant announces that they have reached their destination, and the carriage pulls up to the gates of a massive, opulent estate. They have officially arrived at the grand residence of House Hall. This Marquis tells Colin to come with him, officially welcoming him to the big leagues, confirming that he is no longer a slave, which is a nice little bonus, but he warns him this does not mean he has earned himself a peaceful life. In this world, only the strong survive, and Colin's just getting started. Standing before the grand entrance, the Marquis says his help ends right here, and whether Colin can overcome the next trial is entirely on him now. Colin just stares back, ready for whatever this new game is. This Marquis smirks, admitting he has high hopes for the newly minted Colin Hall, and with that he leaves Colin to face the first stage of his new life alone. Turns out, noble society is obsessed with bloodline purity to maintain their magic, and the Hall family is apparently the most fanatical of them all, with one exception: Darius Hall himself, who was born to a servant mother and faced endless prejudice. But through sheer, overwhelming strength, he clawed his way to the top, eventually becoming a duke and the undisputed lord of the Rhine territory. Back in the present, the Marquis leads Colin into the mansion's main hall, telling him that his past does not matter in the slightest here, because in this house, strength is the only thing that has any value. Wealth, status, honor, all the things these nobles kill for are on the table, as the Marquis promises to give him anything he desires. Assuming, of course, that Colin actually has the skills to earn it. This Marquis tells Colin to name his price. Anything he wants is on the table, and our boy immediately latches onto that one little word: anything. With a dead serious look, he decides to shoot for the absolute moon, asking for the Marquis's own seat as the lord of the territory, a request so unbelievably bold it leaves Darius Hall speechless for a moment. But instead of getting angry, the Marquis just starts laughing his ass off, basically telling Colin that if he has got the guts, he should come and try to take it from him. Colin knows this is because Darius is a true meritocrat at heart, whose belief in equal opportunity makes him a total outcast among the noble elite. As the Marquis finally steps into his grand mansion, a voice greets him, but Darius already knows his real enemies are not outside the walls. They are right here in his own family waiting for him. His wife Katrina and eldest son Freed reveal they already heard about the arena incident, with Katrina casually mentioning a little bird told her all about it. She gives a smug little smile, clearly pleased with her personal information network, which makes the Marquis deeply suspicious, as if he knows he is being watched. Katrina stands there surrounded by her people, looking like the cat that got the cream. And Colin recognizes her as Countess Katrina Williams, the woman who ruined his life before. Turns out she inherited her own title and fortune, making her an equal partner in this house, and she is already plotting to make her son the heir, a trap Colin vows he will not fall for again. Colin steps forward with a confident smirk, announcing that he is honored to be welcomed, and formally introduces himself as Colin Hall, pledging to serve the family. This eldest son, Freed, absolutely loses it at the sound of the family name, demanding to know who this nobody thinks he is to dare use it. Katrina is equally furious, calling out to one of her men named Cornell, who immediately presents himself before her, and she passive-aggressively asks if he has been neglecting the newcomer's education. Cornell just stands there silently, clearly understanding the veiled threat. Before anyone can make a move, Colin draws a sword, stating the name was a gift from the Marquis, and he points it right at them, asking if they have an objection to the Lord's decision. He then doubles down, vowing that one day he will become the Lord and make them all bow. Katrina is left completely stunned by his sheer audacity, while Freed looks like he is about to explode with rage. This Marquis, meanwhile, is just kicking back and enjoying every second of this chaos. This other servants start whispering among themselves about the new guy's claims, calling it absolute nonsense for a slave to say something so bold. Katrina simply clears her throat, a quiet sound that carries immense weight, and the entire hall of servants immediately falls silent in fear. Colin, however, does not even flinch, staring her down without a hint of hesitation. She glares back, her eyes glowing with power, thinking a lowly slave needs to be taught his place. At Katrina's command, her men immediately rush forward to seize Colin, but the Marquis bellows for everyone to stop before they can lay a hand on him. He then doubles down, confirming everything Colin said is true, including the promise of his title. This bombshell leaves his son Freed absolutely stunned, who cannot believe his father would make such a declaration in public. Darius just gives him a look that says the decision is final. Seeing she has lost the direct approach, Katrina smoothly changes tactics, pretending to concede while already setting her next trap. She brings up the hundreds of servants working tirelessly in the manor, pointing out how very few of them have ever been granted a family name, a privilege reserved for only the most loyal and proven retainers. So for some random nobody to just show up and call himself Hall is a massive insult, and she claims the rest of the household will never accept it. Her modest proposal is to give Colin a little test to prove himself, where if he fails, he gets kicked out of the house for good. Colin, however, sees right through this and immediately shuts her down. Freed jumps at the chance to mock him, asking if he is getting cold feet, but Colin just smirks, saying there is no point if he is the only one being tested. He then flips the script, suggesting everyone take the test, with the name going to the winner, calling Freed a failure. This public humiliation sends the eldest son into a blind rage, having never been so insulted in his life. Freed is absolutely losing his mind at the thought of competing with servants for his inheritance, but his mother Katrina quickly puts a hand on his shoulder, telling her son to get a grip. She reminds him that a noble must always be graceful and should not lose his temper over a monkey, especially since he has the absolute power of magic on his side. Colin just watches this little family moment, thinking they should all sit back and enjoy the show. Katrina shoots a confident smirk, having successfully reined in her son's temper. Turns out the Marquis actually agreed to Colin's wild proposal. In 1 month, they will hold an open selection test for anyone who wants to try. Until then, Colin has to work as a low-rank servant, which is a bit too familiar for his taste. Still, he sees it as an opportunity, giving him time to study that magic tome he has got. As he is walking with Cornell, the butler points out that Colin seems to know exactly how to get on the Marquis's good side. Cornell explains that Darius's ideals make him a target for other nobles, and he brings up the story Colin told earlier about being taken in by a different noble. He then points out a major hole in that story. The slave traders said they bought him directly from a remote village. Cornell lays his cards on the table, saying it is way too convenient for a perfect candidate to show up right when Darius needed a successor. Colin's expression hardens as the accusation hangs in the air, and Cornell presses the point, holding a blade to his chin and asking if it is not all a bit too coincidental. Colin calmly addresses him by name, not even flinching at the threat. He admits Cornell has a right to be suspicious, but reminds him they are dealing with corrupt slave traders who rig fights, then asks if Cornell really thinks those guys would just let him walk away after he ruined their entire scam. Cornell realizes the slave traders lied, claiming Colin was mid-level when his skills are clearly high-tier, and we get a quick breakdown of the Empire's rigid ranking system for swordsmanship and magic, where most people cap out at mid-level, making high-level fighters extremely rare. Even nobles barely train with a sword, but for elite units like the Royal Guard, it is standard issue. This butler puts it all together. The merchants deliberately fed him false information, basically setting him up to get Colin taken out of the picture for good. Colin just smirks, admitting he has been caught and offers to clear the air. pointing out that a real spy would never be so loud as to aim for the Lord's seat, since their whole job is to blend in and find weaknesses, not paint a target on their back. In fact, if he were a spy trying to get close to the Marquis, he'd be coming for Cornell's job as the head butler instead. After all, taking the butler's position would make it incredibly easy to gather intel on the family. So Colin flips the script and proposes a deal. He will hunt for spies among the servants. And in return, he wants Cornell's full support, even if it makes them enemies of other nobles. He calls it a high-risk, high-return play, since if the Marquis falls, they all go down with him. Cornell is impressed, realizing the kid is not just strong, he is sharp and ready for the consequences. Still, the deal feels a little too convenient, making him suspect Colin has another plan in motion. For now, Cornell decides to play along, offering to show Colin to his new quarters. Colin just gives a knowing smile, accepting the temporary truce. And with that, they head deeper into the massive, imposing Hall family mansion. Cornell tells Colin to pick his new living quarters, explaining that Katrina herself set up the rigid servant ranking system in this house. First-class servants get to serve the main family directly, while second-class servants are at least allowed to live in the main residence. And then there is the third class, who are stuck in the annex and banned from the main building. Their job is all the grunt work for a measly 3 copper coins a day, which is exactly where Colin is being assigned, with one final rule to learn. He must obey his senior servants, absolutely no questions asked. Just on cue, he is introduced to a group of guys who look less like servants and more like thugs, who are already giving him the stink eye, clearly ready for trouble. Cornell reminds him this is all by Katrina's design, basically throwing him to the wolves. This butler walks away with a smug little look on his face, leaving Colin to stew on that one little rule: obey them no matter what. Cornell formally introduces Colin to his new coworkers, and our boy puts on a friendly face, trying to start things off on the right foot, but the other servants are having none of it, immediately mocking his name. One of them sarcastically asks if he is the future lord they have been hearing about. Another gets right in his face, bringing up the fact he already clashed with Katrina and Freed. This ringleader cracks his knuckles, saying they will teach him a proper greeting, and smashes a bottle, making it pretty clear what kind of greeting that is going to be. This ringleader orders Colin to get on his knees and repeatedly beg for forgiveness, while another one gets in his face, telling him to hurry up and get started. This guy makes the classic mistake of putting his hands on Colin, grabbing his collar, but our boy's reaction is instant, twisting the man's arm with brutal efficiency. This other thugs can only stare in shock as their friend is completely overpowered, before Colin sends him flying across the room with a single, powerful throw. This man lands in a heap, already out cold before he even hits the ground. With a cold smirk, Colin announces that if this is how they want it, he will not hold back. He grabs the next guy by the head, mockingly repeating, "I am sorry, sir," while repeatedly introducing the man's face to the hard wooden floor. This remaining servants are just stunned by the sheer speed and violence of it all, and the leader finally snaps, screaming for everyone to just kill him. They grab whatever they can find as makeshift weapons and charge in together. But Colin just calmly picks up a wooden practice sword from a nearby rack. This first attacker is met with a swift strike that sends him spinning through the air, landing in a crumpled mess, completely out of the fight in one clean hit. He then ducks under a chair swing and delivers a devastating kick right to the next guy's face, which sends the final thug flying backwards, knocked out before he can even scream. In just a few seconds, only the bloodied and battered ringleader is left. Colin presses the tip of the wooden sword to his throat, ending this little greeting for good. Colin presses the sword to the man's throat, asking if he is satisfied now, and the terrified ringleader can only stammer out that he is. With the greeting officially over, Colin turns his back on the mess, but the thug is not quite done making terrible life choices just yet. He grabs a broken bottle, getting ready for a last-ditch sneak attack, and lunges forward, screaming that he is going to end Colin right here, only for our boy to sidestep and disarm him with brutal efficiency, leaving the man clutching his now useless hand in agony. Without even a change in expression, Colin just keeps on walking. He figures that little display should be enough to satisfy Cornell for the time being, but he knows there is no telling what will happen from here on out. Alone in his new quarters, he finally pulls out the magic book he has been hiding, realizing he needs to learn magic if he wants to truly protect himself. A flashback explains that when Katrina married the Marquis, she replaced the entire staff, which is why Darius appointed his sworn friend Cornell as butler to keep her in check. Cornell not only has power but also the special privilege of approving the next successor. Colin remembers from his past life that Cornell met a tragic end, and his death was the trigger that allowed Katrina to seize power and install Freed as the heir. Back in the present, Colin knows things would not have gone so wrong if Cornell had lived, so he focuses on the tome, needing to learn basic offense and defense magic immediately. This moment he touches the tome, a torrent of raw magical energy floods directly into him, with the book's contents pouring straight into his mind in a wave of agonizing pain. And his body seizes up as the incredible power courses through his veins, revealing a vision of a dark, armored knight representing the tome's malevolent will, which tries to overwhelm him with commands to destroy and submit, a corrupting influence trying to completely break his spirit. He struggles against the immense pressure, wondering if this is the true price of learning magic, flashing back to a memory of a girl who told him to simply feel its gentle flow, which makes him grit his teeth, sarcastically noting how easy nobles must have it, but the sheer difficulty of it all just gets him fired up for the fight. He channels all his willpower to resist the tome's dark influence, refusing to be dominated by this ancient power no matter what it takes, and with a final push of determination, he manages to overcome the trial. A bright light bursts from his room, signaling the end of his intense training session. This next morning, the other third-class servants are already at work doing laundry, when two of the thugs from yesterday spot someone approaching, and they immediately recognize that it is the new guy Colin. He strolls out yawning, casually mentioning he expected them to try and jump him in his sleep, adding with a smirk that it would not have done them any good anyway. A quick check of his new status reveals he is now a beginner mage with Grandmaster swordsmanship. Colin wakes up with a confident smirk, his overnight magic training a complete success, and after a long night, his first thought is getting something to eat. Stepping outside, he finds the courtyard being cleared by a squad of guards on patrol, where all the other servants are already bowing their heads in submission. One of the guards barks at them to keep their eyes on the ground or risk getting hurt. At that moment, a young servant carrying a bucket accidentally stumbles into their path, and he freezes on the spot, realizing his mistake far too late. A guard shoves him hard, sending the bucket of water flying across the ground, which splashes directly onto the boots of their eye-patch-wearing lieutenant. This guard who pushed him immediately starts screaming at the kid for his carelessness, while the terrified servant begs for forgiveness, explaining he just was not looking. This lieutenant seems to accept his apology, saying it cannot be helped if it was an accident. But as the servant thanks him, the man's expression turns absolutely sadistic. He leans in close with a chilling smile, adding a quiet however. He grabs the kid by the head, saying that eyes that look the wrong way are not needed, before delivering a swift and brutal punishment right there in the open. This other servants can only watch in frozen horror at the sudden violence. One of the guards snaps at the onlookers, furious that they are even watching, and screams for everyone to get on their knees, an order they instantly obey. Everyone except Colin, who is still standing and just wondering what is for breakfast. One of the guards immediately starts yelling for his boss, pointing Colin out as the guy who wrecked his hand and warning the lieutenant he is unhinged. This lieutenant finally addresses the one person who did not kneel, calling out to Colin, who just turns around without a hint of fear. He recognizes the lieutenant's cronies and asks if they want their hands broken too, but the eye-patch-wearing sadist just laughs it off, saying they believe in an eye for an eye as his men draw their swords. In response, Colin calmly offers them a choice of their own, gripping his practiced sword and asking if they'd rather keep their arms or their heads. This lieutenant smirks, saying he is not desperate enough to fight Colin himself. Instead, he steps aside and says he will leave the job to someone else. Colin's eyes narrow as a new challenger steps forward into the courtyard, a man the lieutenant introduces as Daku, a former slave arena champion. Our boy is completely floored, never expecting to see his old friend in a place like this. A flashback reveals they were once comrades in arms, fighting back-to-back, and were close enough to celebrate hard-won victories as sworn brothers. Back in the present, Colin realizes Daku was being pushed around by these same guards just moments ago, and he asks his old friend if he is really going to fight on their behalf. Daku just states the house rules: juniors obey seniors and rule breakers get punished. Colin understands they are both just pawns here, with Daku forced to be the enforcer. Colin just smirks, completely unimpressed by the whole situation, while Daku stands ready, forced into this pointless confrontation. His expression is grim, knowing he has no choice but to follow orders, but the lieutenant is about to learn that Colin does not play by anyone's rules. In a flash, Colin declares he will crush rules like that and vanishes from sight, reappearing behind the lieutenant with the man's own sword at his throat. Daku can only stare, realizing what just happened in a split second, as he looks down at his empty hand, completely disarmed before he could even move. This lieutenant starts sweating, trying to threaten Colin by saying he is backed by Freed, boasting that he was personally chosen and has divine favor on his side. He warns that defying him means making an enemy of everyone in the estate, but Colin just presses the blade closer, clearly not caring about any of that. This lieutenant seems to concede, but says he cannot just let this go unpunished, and decides to deal with someone else before getting back to Colin. With a sadistic grin, he orders his men to make an example out of Daku instead, and they immediately turn on the former champion, delivering a brutal beatdown. Colin is completely stunned by this sudden, vicious turn of events, as the lieutenant sneers that he will teach this trash a lesson first. His men stand over Daku's broken form, their swords ready for more, before the lieutenant drives a blade straight through his hand, pinning him to the floor. This lieutenant sneers that Daku threw away his only chance, driving the blade through his hand, and he warns his captive that another failure will have far worse consequences. But before he can finish, Colin explodes into action with a burst of energy, leaving Daku to watch in stunned silence at his friend's impossible speed. In a single motion, Colin carves a path through the other guards, taking them all down. Seeing an opening, the lieutenant smirks, thinking he has caught Colin off guard. And he raises his sword for a killing blow, calling our boy an amateur, only for Colin to appear right in front of him, effortlessly blocking the strike. This lieutenant's blade shatters on impact, much to his complete shock as he stares down at the useless hilt still clutched in his hand. Colin coldly informs him that next time it will not just be his sword that breaks. Panicked, the lieutenant orders his men to stop him, but Colin is already moving again. Just in time to see another guard about to finish off the pinned Daku. With a single parry, Colin sends the attacker flying backwards, saving his friend, but Daku just yells at him to stop, insisting he is only making things worse. Colin glances from Daku's injured hand to the other servant who was punished earlier, and with a grim look, he decides to let the guards go for Daku's sake. He tells the lieutenant this is their last chance and orders them to leave, which they do. Once they are alone, Colin asks Daku why he did not fight back when he is clearly stronger, but Daku furiously tells him he is a dead man for defying the lieutenant. Daku shoves Colin away, absolutely furious that he interfered in the first place, and he throws the sword back, telling him to keep the bad luck for himself. Colin just stands there holding two swords and probably wondering what he did wrong, which is when the lieutenant snaps, calling Daku an idiot for making him look foolish. He grabs Daku and shoves his head into a nearby bucket of water, holding him under as a brutal punishment for his failure to follow orders, before finally kicking him away and telling him to get out of his sight. One of the guards asks if he is really letting Colin go, but the lieutenant just scoffs, instead ordering his men to spread the word that Colin has declared war on the senior servants. His plan is to completely isolate our boy, turning everyone in the estate against him. And all Colin can do is ask his old friend why he refuses to fight back. Meanwhile, in another part of the estate, the nobles are enjoying a lavish feast, praying to their god for peace and prosperity while being served by maids. Two of the maids chat about one having a dream of being promoted to a senior servant, seeing it as a sign that their prayers for a better life are being answered. Down in the courtyard, the lower-class servants are told to be grateful for what they have, lining up to receive their meager meal of thin soup from a senior servant, who gets his own bowl before anyone else can even step forward. At that moment, Colin finally arrives, just happy to get something to eat, but the entire yard goes dead silent as he wonders why everyone is staring at him. Just as Colin reaches for his bowl of soup, this senior servant snatches it away, declaring that those who do not work do not eat. Colin just stares back, completely unfazed by the crowd of servants watching him, and instead of making a scene, he just stretches and starts walking away. This others are totally confused, wondering where he thinks he is going until they realize he is heading straight for the senior servant's private dining terrace. He casually pushes his way through the upper-class staff, telling them to move, which immediately gets one of them demanding someone deal with this disrespectful slave. Everyone just watches in disbelief, wondering what his plan is as he approaches their table, and without a word he grabs a piece of bread and starts chowing down. A man who seems to be in charge points out this area is for high-ranking servants only, while another furiously demands that the man, Mr. Cornell, punish Colin on the spot. Cornell just gives Colin a long, calculating look, before calmly saying it is normal for newcomers to make mistakes and asks him to come along. This other servants are stunned by this lenient response as Cornell leads Colin away, and once they are alone, he asks if Colin has forgotten the rule about absolute obedience. Colin just casually dismisses the question, saying that is not the issue here, explaining that his lord promised to reward him based on his skills, and he is skilled enough for a proper meal. He then boldly declares he is taking that offer, and Cornell will be covering his expenses from now on. Cornell's expression darkens, ominously adding that in return, Colin has to find a spy hiding somewhere in the estate. Elsewhere, the lord of the manor is heading out for an early hunt, which seems a bit unusual, and it turns out there was a disturbance in the dark, deep forest he wants to investigate. Colin, still munching on his stolen bread, happens to overhear this little detail, and a smirk tells us he has just found his next destination. A short while later, he is in the woods and spots a rather demonic-looking deer, a red-eyed black deer to be exact. With a quick flick of his wrist, he lands a perfect shot right in its side, looking pretty pleased with himself as the beast goes down. He walks over to claim his prize with his sword at the ready, and a final strike makes sure the creature is not getting back up. As he inspects it, his eye glows, sensing something inside. He pulls out a glowing purple orb, a monster core. A quick info dump explains these cores can be used for crafting and potions, and even though this one is low rank, it is perfect for making mana potions. Back in his conversation with Cornell, he learns only guards and knights can enter the hunting grounds, so Colin immediately spots the loophole, just join the guard squad. Back in the present, he is about to continue his hunt when someone yells at him to stop. And it is some angry kid in armor, furious that a low-rank servant is hunting where he should not be. Colin just looks back, completely unbothered by the confrontation. Instead of explaining, Colin just says he will borrow the kill for a bit, and before the kid can even react, Colin snatches the sword right out of his hand. He immediately uses the guard's own blade to finish off the deer, before handing it back and declaring the prey now officially belongs to the kid. This guard is absolutely losing his mind over this twisted logic, complaining to himself about being stuck with a low-rank servant on an important mission. Turns out, this was all Cornell's idea, and the kid is not happy about it, revealing he is on an official task and even has Cornell's dagger as proof. Colin clarifies they are both supposed to assist the Lord's investigation and gather food, which only makes the guard more annoyed that he is stuck with this guy of all people. He decides to just ignore Colin and focus on the mission for his own sake, and after a successful hunt, they have got a pretty good haul of meat. This kid thinks this is his big chance for a promotion to full guard if he plays his cards right, getting himself all hyped up for the task ahead, only to find Colin has already started a campfire and is cooking their supplies. He runs over, completely furious at Colin's audacity, yelling that the food is meant for the Lord, not for some servant to just eat. Colin, already mid-bite, just says there is plenty to go around and even offers the kid a piece of the freshly grilled meat. But the guard completely panics, shouting that the vice captain is his enemy and he'd never take his food. Colin smirks, reminding the kid that servants only get to eat once every 3 days, and since he is getting punished for losing his sword, his next meal is a long way off. He even uses some twisted logic, asking how he is supposed to protect the Lord on an empty stomach, promising he will not tell a soul about this little snack break. This guard finally caves, justifying it as necessary for the mission and the Lord's sake, which makes Colin wonder why someone so strong lets the vice captain walk all over him. This kid just asks what good being strong is in their world, explaining his belief that nobles have divine power because their ancestors were faithful. Turns out he has worked his ass off to become a mid-rank servant just so his little sister can be proud, and he furiously asks why he would throw all that away just to prove a point. He insists that being a servant is a blessing, and the only path is to work hard and not question things, but Colin looks completely unconvinced by this whole know your place speech. He scoffs at the idea of divine power, calling it nothing more than a bit of magic, which immediately sets the guard off, daring him to learn a spell if it is so simple. Colin just stares him down and asks what he'd say if he offered to teach him magic right now, leaving the kid completely stunned by the sheer audacity of the claim. He can barely process the question, asking if Colin can actually use magic, a question that hangs in the air between them for a moment. Before Colin can answer, a massive roar rips through the forest, startling them both. And they whip around to see what kind of creature could make a sound like that. That roar came from a pack of spectral wolves, and they are already tearing into the Lord's hunting party, whose captain is desperately trying to keep his men from breaking formation. He has clearly underestimated these beasts, and now his squad is paying the price for it. These wolves are just too fast, breaking through their defenses and taking down another guard. This Captain Glenn can barely hold one back, furious that his elite team is getting wrecked by a few monsters. He manages to land a solid hit on one, but there are still way too many left. Just as he's distracted, one of his men screams a warning about what is right behind him, and it turns out he is completely surrounded by 3 of the creatures. With no way out, Glenn braces for the inevitable end, when suddenly an arrow flies out of nowhere, nailing one of the wolves mid-pounce. Another arrow follows, taking down a second wolf and saving his life. It is Colin and the kid, arriving just in the nick of time to provide some much-needed backup. Colin immediately recognizes them as Azure Flame wolves, whose parts sell for a very high price. More importantly, he knows they drop powerful monster cores, which is exactly what he is after. With a smirk, he promises that not a single one of these walking paychecks is getting away. Instead of playing it safe, he charges headfirst right into the middle of the pack. This captain can only watch in disbelief, wondering what kind of idiot would do that. Colin just scoffs at the wolves, calling them trash that cannot hunt without numbers. He draws his bow, confidently declaring that they are no match for him, and unleashes a devastating volley of arrows, dropping multiple beasts in a single shot. Colin's eyes glow with focus, completely unimpressed by the charging beasts. And he is almost amused that the wolves keep attacking despite seeing their packmates get wiped out. It is like they just do not comprehend the massive gap in their strength levels, letting him effortlessly dodge another lunge without breaking a sweat. Another perfect shot takes down a wolf right in front of the stunned guards, who can barely process what they are seeing as the creature falls, while Colin just scoffs, dismissing them as nothing more than simple beasts after all. Just as he says that, he spots the rest of the pack flanking him from the woods, which does not seem to bother him in the slightest as he keeps firing. Captain Glenn is in absolute disbelief that this servant is tearing through the monsters that decimated his squad. But Colin's attention is suddenly drawn to something else entirely, as he dodges a much stronger blast of Azure energy. Turns out, the alpha of the pack has finally decided to show itself. And this one looks way more intelligent and dangerous than the others. It immediately unleashes a volley of spectral projectiles right at him, but Colin just flips through the air, landing a few arrows of his own mid-dodge before using his bow to parry a direct lunge from the alpha beast. He kicks off its head to create some much-needed distance, landing perfectly on his feet a few yards away from the creature. With the smaller threats handled, he draws his sword, ready to finish this one-on-one. Colin lands the final decisive arrow, putting the alpha wolf down for good, while the young guard Daku watches on, reminding himself to stay sharp, and Lord Darius gives them an impressed thumbs up for their timely rescue. Daku seems a little overwhelmed by the sudden praise from a noble, as Captain Glenn approaches, acknowledging their skill and asking who they serve. Colin introduces Daku as a reserve guard and himself as a low-level servant, explaining they were sent by Cornell to support the Lord's investigation. Glenn is completely floored that Cornell sent such a low-ranking duo for this mission, and one of his men scoffs, calling Cornell an old hag for the decision. Daku overhears the insult and looks genuinely shocked by the blatant disrespect. Colin, meanwhile, has already carved out the Alpha's monster core, noting its mid-rank quality. Already planning to use it to craft a potion from his magic book. But one of the guards, a guy named Marvin, immediately starts yelling at him, demanding to know who gave a servant permission to touch their kill. Captain Glenn orders Marvin to stand down, reminding him their mission takes priority, but Colin calmly asks if calling his savior a brat is really the best move right now. This comeback just makes Marvin even more furious. And he completely loses his temper while Glenn tries to hold him back. Colin just gives him a cold stare, locking the name Marvin into his memory. Elsewhere, the Marquis stands in a grand hall, staring intently at a dark portrait on the wall. This Marquis recalls his most trusted knights, Glenn, Marvin, and even Cornell, and it turns out Colin knows all about them from his past life, remembering how their deaths in this forest led to the Marquis's downfall, a fate he is here to prevent. Back in the present, Daku is desperately trying to apologize for Colin's attitude, but Marvin's companion just snaps that Cornell's dog should keep its mouth shut. Daku is left completely speechless by the blatant disrespect, while Colin steps right up to Glenn, asking if he is the one who boasted about becoming Lord. Glenn has to admit that Colin is indeed strong, giving him that much, but he warns him to drop the arrogant act before he seriously regrets it. Colin just stares back, completely silent and unimpressed. Deciding to leave, Glenn says they are grateful for the rescue but have a mission to get back to. But as they turn to go, a sudden tremor stops everyone dead in their tracks, and a massive flock of birds erupts from the trees, signaling something big is on the move. A moment later, a whole new pack of azure flame wolves bursts out from the woods, leaving the guards completely stunned by the sheer number of them. Leading the horde is a massive, white-furred beast that one of the guards recognizes as the Azure King. This absolute monster leads the charge, its pack swarming the clearing right behind it. This alpha lets out a furious roar, its eyes glowing with raw power before unleashing a massive wave of azure energy right at the guards, who can only watch in terror as the devastating attack barrels towards them, just as the Azure King's blast is about to wipe them out. Colin steps right in front of the attack, blocking the entire thing with nothing but his sword, leaving Captain Glenn completely stunned. He barely manages to ask who this kid even is, and Colin just smirks, casually mentioning he saved them again. This Azure King is obviously not happy about this interruption, but Colin is already on the move, leaping into the air and bringing his sword down with a move called Mountain Crusher. This hit lands square on the beast's head. But Colin is surprised by just how sturdy this thing is. This Wolf King retaliates with a massive wave of energy, forcing Colin to block and get sent flying backwards, though he manages to absorb the impact. As he lands, he realizes his current body is not strong enough, admitting it'll be tough to win this with swordsmanship alone. This other guards rally around him, with one warning that this beast has taken down many of the Empire's elites. This Azure King just shakes off the hit, completely unfazed, and summons its entire pack to swarm the guards. This squad starts to panic, knowing they can barely handle the minions, let alone the king. But Colin just tells them not to worry about the pack, calling them nothing more than the king's puppets. He explains that the wolves are just mindless puppets, so taking out the king is the only real objective, which leaves Captain Glenn completely stunned by the sheer audacity of the idea. And one of his men points out that it is impossible, especially since Colin's sword is already damaged. But Colin just smirks, saying they will not know for sure until they actually try, leaving the guard convinced that this servant has completely lost his mind. This rest of the squad is clearly on edge, knowing a direct charge through the pack is suicide, but Colin tells them there is no need for a reckless assault like that, confidently assuring them that an opening will present itself soon enough. As if on cue, the Azure King lets out a low, threatening growl, before unleashing a massive roar that sends its entire pack charging forward. This guards brace for the incoming wave as Glenn orders them to intercept, but Colin calmly tells everyone to hold their positions for now, instructing them to draw the enemy in closer instead of meeting them head-on. Marvin's friend immediately snaps back, questioning when a servant got the right to give them orders. But Glenn shuts him down, deciding to trust Colin's judgment for the moment. Colin then turns to Daku, telling the young guard to come with him, motivating him by asking if he wants to be a brother his little sister can be proud of. This mention of his sister, Erica, seems to give Daku the resolve he needed, just as Glenn shouts a warning that the wolves are about to crash into their lines, but as the guards prepare to fight, Colin screams at them to wait. Colin calmly instructs them to let the wolves get even closer, waiting for the perfect moment as the beasts are right on top of them before shouting now. And leaping over the front line with Daku in tow. Mid-air, he orders Captain Glenn to activate their formation with holy protection, and Glenn immediately unleashes his sword art, creating a massive golden barrier, which stops the first wave cold, prompting Colin to order Marvin to attack. Marvin, despite his attitude, follows the command and unleashes Heaven's Shaker, a powerful ground slam that shatters the charging pack around the shield. Colin then directs a female guard named Sira to open a path with Phantom Blade, and her rapid strikes cut a clean line right through the remaining monsters. Captain Glenn is completely stunned, realizing this servant knows all their individual sword arts just as Colin tells Daku it is time for them to make their move. As they charge through the newly opened path, Colin tells Daku not to slow them down, leaving the young guard totally confused by what is even happening anymore. This two of them sprint past the fallen wolves, heading straight for the king with Daku desperately trying to figure out what Colin is actually planning. Colin explains that the Azure King is used to being feared, so a direct, fearless charge will unnerve it, adding that humans react the exact same way to unexpected aggression. He then points out that once they are in close, the king cannot use its ranged attacks, and Daku finally realizes Colin might be planning to use something other than a sword, like magic. Colin starts gathering a massive amount of energy into his hands, unleashing his fully restored mana to cast a spell from his book called Ice Lotus, which manifests as a complex magic circle right in the Azure King's path. He fires a volley of ice shards that rain down on the charging beast, leaving Daku completely stunned that a servant can even use magic. This Azure King just tanks the hits, looking more pissed off than anything else, but Colin just smirks, taunting the monster for its overconfidence. This, of course, just makes the Wolf King even more furious, which is exactly when Colin tells Daku to make his move. This young guard charges forward without hesitation, leaping at the massive beast, and manages to land a solid strike on its neck while it is distracted. Meanwhile, Colin is already preparing his real finisher, telling the wolf its time is up, summoning a massive spectral blue knight armed with a colossal sword. This ethereal warrior looms over the Azure King, ready to strike, and the monster finally looks up, realizing way too late what is about to happen. This spectral knight brings its huge blade down with overwhelming force, landing a direct hit that completely shatters the king's head. This impact sends the beast's body flying as it starts to disintegrate, its form completely breaking apart before it even hits the ground. Daku can only stare at the aftermath, totally unable to believe what he just saw. With the battle over, Colin just stands there holding a magic crystal, looking completely unfazed, and Daku is still processing that a servant can use magic while Captain Glenn runs over to check on them. Glenn thanks Colin for the save, admitting the rest of the wolves scattered the second the king fell. Colin just plays it cool, saying the plan worked, but Glenn knows they would have been wiped out without him. Sierra picks up one of the crystal shards, clearly intrigued by this kid's mysterious power. Meanwhile, Marvin's buddy starts laughing, saying Colin reminds him of the big guy back in the day. When Daku looks confused, the guy clarifies he means Lord Darius, their old commander. He mentions they were all part of the Lionheart Brigade, then calls Sierra the old hag's lapdog. Daku has been listening to this guy run his mouth the whole time, and that is the final straw. He completely loses it, screaming about being called a lapdog for Cornell. He marches right up to Sierra, telling the old lady she'd better remember his name. Sierra's eyes just go wide because he just hit her biggest insecurity dead on. His friend tries to warn him that calling Sierra an old hag is a very, very bad idea, and the realization of what he just did hits Daku like a ton of bricks. Sierra gets right in his face, absolutely furious, demanding to know how she is an old lady. She insists she is a young, fresh girl in her prime, thank you very much. But Daku, trying to double down, just says she is not that young and it is painful to watch. That is when Sierra snaps and starts throttling him as the other guards try to break it up. Colin just watches this whole circus with a deadpan expression as the squad devolves into a friendly brawl. But their moment of levity is cut short by the heavy stomp of a horse's hoof right in front of them. Their little moment is cut short by a nobleman on horseback asking what all the racket is about, and the guards immediately recognize him as young Master Fried, much to Colin's annoyance. Daku, on the other hand, looks like he has just seen a ghost, completely freezing up at the sight of this pompous newcomer. This entire squad, including Captain Glenn, drops to a knee as Fried explains he heard the commotion. He takes a quick look around at the aftermath of the battle, and Glenn explains they were ambushed by a pack of azure flames while on their investigation. This captain gives full credit to Colin and Daku, admitting they would have all been monster food without them. This, of course, draws Fried's attention to Colin, who is busy inspecting one of the dead wolves, casually pulling his sword out of its neck without a care in the world. Glenn asks Fried to report their accomplishments, but the young master looks less than impressed by the idea. Internally, Fried is already spinning this as someone making a brazen play for his father's seat, and he is worried this accomplishment will put him at a disadvantage in the line of succession. His expression immediately sours with jealousy and paranoia, and he decides right then and there how he is going to handle this, turning his attention to Daku. Fried condescendingly calls out Daku for vanishing, only to turn up running with a servant, accusing him of violating the rules by bringing a commoner into the hunting grounds to split the rewards. He straight up calls Daku a worthless man, leaving the young guard completely stunned. Fried then twists the knife, threateningly mentioning Daku's sister Erika and some lesson from the past, but before Daku can even react, Colin steps in, retorting that it is better than being a mama's boy. Colin just smirks, greeting the pompous noble with a casual "We meet again, reject," which gets a barely suppressed snort out of Sierra and the other guards, and Fried absolutely loses it, demanding to know what a servant just called him. Colin keeps going, pointing out that the guards do not kneel because Fried is impressive, but because his mommy happens to be a countess, a fact that stuns the other servants. He doubles down on the mockery, saying it must be nice to ride on your parents' coattails, and when Fried threatens to have him killed, Colin just calmly agrees that he could, but then twists the knife, saying he'd have to go ask his mommy for permission first, even acting out the pathetic request with a smug grin on his face. This, of course, sends Fried into a full-blown tantrum, screaming at the top of his lungs, and in that instant, magical chains erupt from the ground, binding Colin completely. His eyes go wide as he is instantly restrained, unable to move an inch, as several hooded figures with skeletal masks rise from the earth, holding the chains. One of them appears directly behind Colin, holding a blade right to his throat. And the entire squad immediately recognizes them as the infamous Blades of the Empire. Sierra explains that they are from the Williams family, a clan of professional assassins so feared that even nobles tremble at their name. Turns out, Fried's mother is the matriarch of this deadly family, and she does not mess around, but one of the assassins warns Fried not to do anything rash right now. Captain Glenn quickly steps in, reminding the young master that these assassins are here on Cornell's orders to assist them, but Fried just glares back, asking if Glenn is planning on defying him too. Captain Glenn tries to protest, but he is completely outmaneuvered by the noble's authority until Colin, still chained up, calmly calls out his name, telling him to just forget about this and go report their findings to the Lord. Glenn and Sierra immediately realize the kid is giving them a clean way out of this mess, with Sierra whispering that they cannot side with either of them and need to leave now. This captain grits his teeth, hating the idea of abandoning Colin but seeing no other choice. So he excuses his squad and they reluctantly turn to leave as Fried smirks in victory. This pompous noble then turns back to Colin, gloating about how powerless he is now. But Colin just grins back, telling him to get on with it if he's going to do something. Fried just laughs, absolutely loving the control he has over the situation, and then gets what he calls a brilliant idea while drawing his sword. He calls out Daku's name, making the young guard freeze in place, reminding him with a twisted grin that all actions have consequences. Fried then throws his sword into the ground right in front of Daku, offering him a chance to make things right by killing the slave for him. Daku is completely stunned, unable to even process the horrific command, as Fried promises to overlook everything if he just follows this one order. This scene then flashes back to Colin's previous life 1 month after the demon invasion began, where he is being beaten by another human inside a monster encampment, and as the man raises a sword to finish him, Colin glares up from the dirt, refusing to break. This flashback continues, revealing a monster king on a throne who mocks Colin's attempt to be a savior, offering to let the other human prisoners go free under one cruel condition. Colin must personally execute his own comrade, who is being held by another monster. This man, who we now see as Daku from the past, begs him not to do it, but the Monster King just grins sadistically, asking Colin what his choice will be. Without a word, Colin picks up the sword that lies before him and slowly walks towards his friend with the blade held ready. In that moment, Daku's life flashes before his eyes, remembering his father's death on his sister's birthday and how he had to comfort a young, crying Erika after they became orphans. He recalls how they became slaves until Lord Darius took them in, giving them a new life. Daku then explains that Erika was sent to the Williams estate, believing she is still safe from the demons. And with tears streaming down his face, he makes a final request for Colin to look after her. He even gives him small details like how she is a picky eater and should not be spoiled too much, asking Colin to tell Erika that her big brother died an honorable death as a knight. Colin can only apologize to Daku, his face shadowed with regret as he prepares to strike. This memory ends, snapping us back to the present where Daku faces the exact same impossible choice. Colin is still bound by the assassin's chains, completely at Fried's mercy, while Daku trembles, his hands shaking as he grips the sword Fried threw at his feet. Fried, however, is quickly losing his patience with the whole display, screaming at Daku and demanding to know what he is hesitating for. Daku finally finds his spine, refusing to kill the man who just saved all their lives. Fried, however, just gives him a smug little smirk, completely unfazed, and asks how Erika will feel when she finds out her brother threw his life away for a stranger. This threat lands exactly as intended, hitting Daku right where it hurts, as Fried casually mentions he has some recent news about his sister from the Williams estate. He claims she started skipping meals to buy Daku a sword, even collapsing from exhaustion just last week. This revelation absolutely shatters Daku, his face twisting in horror and rage. Fried then delivers the final blow, threatening to stop looking after Erika if Daku is just going to abandon her anyway. That is all it takes for Daku to completely break, dropping to his knees in desperation, and he begs the young master to please save his sister. Seeing his victory, Fried turns back with a look of pure satisfaction before repeating his cruel command with a sadistic grin, "Kill him." But instead of fear, Colin just starts laughing, asking if that is really the plan. He is actually laughing his ass off, chained up and held by assassins, which obviously gets under Fried's skin, who demands to know what is so funny. Colin just grins back, retorting that even a stray dog knows how to bark, then suggests a more entertaining alternative, a fight to the death between him and Daku. This sudden confidence throws Fried for a loop, making him wonder what the hell Colin is thinking, and one of the assassins seems to give him a quick assessment of the situation. Fried quickly decides Colin is just bluffing, putting on a brave face because he is terrified of the blades of the Empire. Fried absolutely loves this idea, eagerly shouting for the fight to begin, and as the assassins back off, Colin and Daku are left facing each other in the clearing. Daku raises his sword, his face a grim mask of conflict and despair, asking Colin if he is actually serious about going through with this. From his horse, Fried immediately warns Daku not to dare hesitate, reminding him of the consequences for his precious little sister. Before Daku can even react, Colin explodes into motion, initiating the duel with a powerful leap, and Daku barely gets his guard up in time to block the ferocious downward slash. Colin is unbelievably fast, using the momentum to spin away and reposition instantly, leaving Daku completely stunned by his opponent's sheer speed and skill. Without a moment's pause, Colin comes in again with another relentless attack, their blades clashing as Daku desperately tries to keep up with the flurry of strikes. But Colin is clearly on another level, his glowing eyes fixed on Daku as he overpowers him. He apologizes, telling Daku that he does not want to die either, which seems to snap something inside the young guard, whose eyes flare with rage. Daku screams and swings wildly, but Colin parries the desperate attack with ease, following up with a solid kick that sends Daku stumbling backward. Watching from the side, Fried holds up 3 fingers with a smug look on his face, while Colin grins, declaring he is going to end this whole thing in 3 strikes. Daku can only stare in shock, finally understanding the terrifying gap between them. Daku glares back, declaring he does not even need 3 strikes to win this, then ups the ante by saying he will end this whole thing in 3 seconds. Colin just smirks back, completely unimpressed by the kid's sudden bravado. And as they face off, Fried just scoffs from his high horse. Daku makes the first move, charging in with a powerful overhead slash, forcing Colin to bring his own blade up to defend against the attack. As their swords clash, Daku shouts that he will not abandon his comrades, which triggers a strange memory for Colin of a hooded person saying the exact same thing. This vision clearly shakes him, making him break out in a cold sweat. And even the masked assassins seem completely baffled by this sudden turn of events. In the next instant, Colin and Daku are suddenly back-to-back, facing outward, as a massive shockwave of blue energy erupts from their position, tearing up the ground. This other servants are sent flying, caught completely off guard by the blast, and even Fried's horse rears back in terror from the sheer force of it all. This pompous noble can only stare in disbelief, his smug look completely gone. As Daku launches himself through the air, aiming his sword right at Fried's head, he lets out a furious battle cry, bringing the blade down with everything he has, but Fried just glares, a sinister purple aura flaring to life around him. He stops the attack cold, catching the sword with his bare hand without even flinching, smirking as he realizes Daku might actually be a threat after all. Daku glares back at Fried, telling him not to underestimate him for a second. And the resulting blast of energy sends both of them flying in opposite directions, leaving Daku to land on his feet, now surrounded by the blades of the Empire. Colin's eyes widen, clearly not expecting this kind of power from the kid, while Fried, looking genuinely terrified for once, screams at his men to stay back. His assassins do not listen though, already moving in to restrain Daku with their chains, forcing Fried to power up again, declaring he will be the one to finish this. Colin just watches this whole mess unfold, his expression unreadable, as Fried lets out a furious scream, channeling a massive amount of lightning magic. A complex magic circle materializes from the raw power he is gathering in his hand, which makes one of the other servants absolutely freak out at the display. At the same time, a system window pops up for Colin, detecting the magic power, and he just smirks, realizing things are about to get seriously messy. Turns out he can see Fried's stats: intermediate lightning magic but 0 magic resistance, and even though the system warns him he cannot withstand it, Colin's already calculating. He figures he will not know for sure until he tries, clutching a handful of blue crystals as Fried roars that he is about to teach Daku a lesson in raw power. He unleashes a massive wolf-shaped blast of lightning right at the young guard, but it slams into a huge wall of ice that erupts from the ground, with Colin standing calmly behind it, having blocked the attack completely. This lightning wolf slams into the ice wall, erupting in a massive explosion of energy, leaving Fried completely stunned, wondering if that was real magic or just some cheap trick, as the sheer force of the impact shatters the ice barrier into a million pieces, throwing the noble and his horse back from the sheer power of the blast. He is totally baffled, trying to figure out how ice magic even appeared in the first place, when Colin's voice cuts through the smoke, asking if that is really all he has got, and our boy is standing there completely unharmed, calling the noble a failure. This other servants can only stare, absolutely shocked that he is still alive after that, but Fried is in pure denial, refusing to believe a mere slave could possibly wield magic. He starts powering up again, screaming that it is impossible for this to be real, while Colin braces himself for the next attack, determined not to be beaten here. But a system window suddenly pops up, warning him he is completely out of mana. He immediately falters, stumbling as the power completely drains from his body, and Fried takes the opening, unleashing another overwhelming torrent of lightning. This time, Colin is caught right in the middle of the storm, totally defenseless. As Fried just screams for him to die, pouring all his rage into the spell. This blast of pure energy completely engulfs Colin's entire position, and as the lightning tears into him, he starts to wonder if this is the end, thinking he is about to die right after finally getting a second chance at life. But then a new warning flashes, saying that using magic now risks a rampage. Refusing to go down, Colin roars that he is not about to die here as a wild blue energy erupts from his body. And this new power begins manifesting as some kind of demonic armor wrapping around his arm and shoulder. This system immediately freaks out, showing all of his stats as unknown. It cannot even read him anymore, and with his eyes now glowing a menacing purple, Colin seems to be adjusting to this sudden power-up. Meanwhile, Daku is clutching his head in agony, completely baffled by what is happening to his own body. Then glares at Colin, warning him that this berserker state will not last for long, which is a pretty ominous thing to know. Seeing his 2 targets powering up, Fried decides he has had enough and unleashes another massive lightning spell to end this, which makes one of the servants question if that is even magic since he has never seen anything like it. But it is Daku who moves first, leaping into the air with his sword, now glowing with the same strange blue aura. Letting out a furious scream as he rockets directly towards the smug noble on his horse. He brings his sword down, not on Fried, but on the ground, creating a massive wall of ice just like Colin did earlier, catching Fried completely off guard as he throws up an arm to shield himself from the blast. This sheer force of the impact sends the noble and his terrified horse stumbling backward, while from the sidelines, Colin just watches with a grimly focused expression, still in control. In the next instant, Daku is right in Fried's face, grabbing the arm that is still crackling with lightning, and Fried's eyes flare with pure rage, clearly not used to a slave putting hands on him. He grits his teeth, finally realizing he might actually be in some serious trouble here, just as their combined energies explode outward in a massive shockwave that slams into everything nearby. Fried gets blasted right off his horse, cursing as he is sent flying through the air. And through it all, Colin just stands there, sword at the ready, watching the chaos he helped start. Fried sizes up the situation, a little too confident for a guy who just got blasted off his horse, assuming Daku's already at his limit while he powers up another massive lightning spell, gathering an absolutely absurd amount of purple energy around himself, as Daku, still glowing with that strange blue power, prepares to meet him head-on. Launching himself forward with his sword, ready to end this whole mess for good, and he screams that this is the end, aiming right for the smug noble, their powers colliding in a massive explosion of blue and purple energy. But just as they are locked in their struggle, Colin watches with those same strange markings on his face, when a golden magic circle suddenly appears between them, stopping the clash cold, and the force of it sends Fried flying backward completely off balance, revealing a new, older man who calmly tells them that is quite enough, reminding them this is supposed to be a hunting ground, not their personal arena, and if they want to fight so badly they can do it when they get back. Fried is stunned, recognizing the man as his father while Colin knows him as Darius, and with the fight over, Daku's power finally gives out, forcing him to his knees, as Darius just watches the scene with a grim, unimpressed expression, letting Daku collapse completely, finally able to rest after pushing himself so far. A few days later, he starts to wake up under a fancy chandelier, groggily wondering where the hell he even is when the memory of the battle and Colin's terrifying transformation comes rushing back. Daku suddenly jolts awake in a much nicer room than he is used to and stares at his hands, processing that he really did make it back to the past. A voice cuts in, and it is Colin, casually mentioning that he is finally up, which makes Daku absolutely freak out seeing him so close, especially when Colin flashes a grin that is way more unsettling than friendly. Turns out Daku passed out cold right after that big fight with Fried, and a quick flashback shows Colin carrying him while everyone else panicked around them. Colin admits the whole scene was maybe a little over the top, but says Daku's looking better and suggests they go thank the others for their help. Daku seems a bit stunned by the offer but agrees to go along, and Colin even throws in a personal thank you with a cheesy little wink. This actually surprises Daku, who did not think the guy had a grateful bone in his body. As they walk through the town square, they start getting some weird looks, with a group of guys stopping dead in their tracks to stare at Colin. Daku has no idea what their problem is, but the attention is pretty obvious, and nearby, two maids are gossiping about the rumors surrounding Colin and Fried's clash. Colin overhears his name and immediately asks what they are talking about, which causes the maids to turn around and scream like they have seen a monster. Daku points out they are acting like they just saw a ghost, and that word seems to stick with Colin, who looks like he is putting some pieces together. Daku jokes that Colin looks like a ghost because he is so pale, and Colin immediately snaps back that it is Daku's fault for making him worry. But their bickering is cut short by a group of guards blocking their path. Their one-eyed leader sarcastically greets Daku as the mighty future lord, telling Colin to stay out of it since this is between him and the kid, and declares he is here to settle the score from their last encounter. Colin just watches this guy posture, looking completely unimpressed, as the man claims he was just caught off guard before, and with a snap of his fingers he promises it will not happen again, giving them a look that is supposed to be intimidating. He then glares back at his own men, wondering why nobody is moving, and starts yelling at the guard squad for ignoring his signal to attack. Colin's expression does not even flicker, just pure stone-cold silence. While the one-eyed man gets even more furious at their inaction. He screams at them for forgetting such a basic command, but his men are practically shaking, whispering that Colin's a monster who took on Fried. Daku cannot help but crack a little smile at their terrified faces, leaving their leader to curse them as cowards, realizing he is stuck. He knows backing down now would be a total loss of face, so he pivots, deciding that while he cannot handle Colin, he can definitely take Daku down. He grabs Daku by the collar, accusing him of being an ungrateful wretch for betraying Fried, and Daku just glares back, clearly unimpressed by this guy's misplaced loyalty as the man winds up a punch, vowing to punish him in his lord's place, but his fist gets stopped cold, leaving him completely stunned by the sudden resistance. Daku caught the punch himself, telling the guard he has no right to pass judgment on him, while Colin casually grabs the man's other arm, adding a little extra pressure to the situation. This other guards cannot believe it, and their leader is shocked that Daku actually fought back when a new voice cuts in, demanding to know what all the racket is about this early, and three armored figures walk into the square, immediately drawing the guard leader's attention. He gets a nasty smirk on his face, thinking Daku and Colin are done for now that the royal knights are here. And when the lead knight asks what is going on, the one-eyed man is all too eager to explain. He points a finger, claiming he was just teaching a couple of foolish slaves some manners, but instead of backing him up, one of the knights just gives our boys a friendly little wave, which sends the guard leader into a rage, grabbing the knight and demanding to know what he is doing. This knight just effortlessly shoves him off, much to Daku's obvious amusement, and then reveals he actually bet on Daku waking up today, leaving the guard totally confused. His two companions chime in, confirming they were all in on it and now he owes the woman a drink for winning. This one-eyed man is just staring in disbelief, wondering if he is dreaming this whole thing, sputtering that it has to be against the rules for royal knights to be so chummy with a servant. But the female knight just puts an arm around him, coldly stating that those old rules do not mean a thing to them. She gets right in the guard's face, coldly warning him to shut up unless he wants to lose his other eye, and with that the knights lead Daku and Colin away, leaving the one-eyed man completely stunned. Daku sheepishly thanks them, admitting it looks like he owes them yet another favor, which leads to the whole group celebrating together at a local tavern. He explains he originally just wanted to thank them for saving him but ended up needing to be saved again. This female knight Sira says it worked out perfectly, since that vice captain had been annoying her for a while, prompting one of her companions to ask if she had some personal beef with the guy, but she just slams her mug down, yelling that talking about it will ruin her drink. Their leader clears his throat, cutting through the noise to get everyone's attention, and reveals that they actually wanted to have a serious talk with Daku and Colin. He explains there are only 3 royal knights left and asks them to join their ranks, an offer that shocks Daku. This knight confirms it, adding that they receive the same treatment as first-class servants, but Colin calmly turns him down, saying he is not interested in becoming a royal knight, taking a slow sip of his drink without a hint of hesitation. He explains that he has got his sights set on an even bigger dream, and punctuates the statement with a confident little wink. This bold refusal leaves the 3 knights completely speechless and a little flustered, until the brown-haired one tells Daku not to get cocky about becoming Lord of the Rhine just for beating Fried. Sira immediately corrects him, pointing out that Daku's weird sword move was clearly magic. And if her guess is right, he used azure magic to defeat the king, a fact the king himself confirmed. This brown-haired knight scoffs, asking what a former slave would know about magic, so their leader turns to Colin, demanding an explanation for the whole situation, and Colin realizes they have caught on, knowing he'd have to talk his way out of this, which sends Sira into a flustered tizzy as she starts connecting the dots. While Colin mentally pats himself on the back for preparing a cover story just in case. Sira is putting it all together now, a little too enthusiastically, asking Daku how he is going to explain taking back what is rightfully his, because he is not a slave, he is a former noble, a reveal that silences the entire table. She grabs his hands, completely starstruck by her own brilliant deduction, and lays out this dramatic backstory about him being a persecuted illegitimate child sold into slavery, whose true purpose here is to regain his power and reclaim everything he lost. Daku is just sitting there, completely baffled by where she pulled that fanfiction from, when Colin just bursts out laughing, deciding to play along with the whole thing, loudly praising her for seeing right through his secret and confirming her wild theory. He launches into a sob story about being a noble from Ale who was framed by a conspiracy, swearing that one day he will make the nobles who ruined his life pay for everything. Daku cannot believe this is working, noting that while 2 of them are hooked, their captain would never buy it, but the captain completely falls for it, telling Daku he will keep his secret safe, adding a stern warning to never use magic in front of the lady or Fried, much to Daku's shock. With that settled, the captain mentions the Marquis wants to see Daku now that he is finally awake. As Daku and Colin head off to meet the Marquis, the Royal Knight captain watches them go, his fellow knights waiting silently behind him, and he cannot help but mull over the Ale City part of their story, clearly not buying all of it. Meanwhile, Daku is still in disbelief that Colin's completely fabricated backstory actually worked, so he asks why he chose to be a disgraced noble from Ale City of all places. And Colin explains it is the perfect lie. A chaotic city far from Rhine makes any investigation a nightmare. Daku seems to be slowly catching on to Colin's talent for manipulation, but then changes the subject to something else that has been bothering him, asking about that strange, 3-legged crow hand gesture Colin made earlier. He wonders if it was just another trick to confuse people, but Colin's look says otherwise, triggering a sudden, brutal flashback for Daku to a moment from his past life. He remembers Colin, armored and grim, apologizing to him right before a fight, and in a flash of steel, Colin takes down the monster that had Daku captured. Colin coldly tells the creature to deliver its own final message, then immediately turns that same sword on Daku, telling him to deliver his own message too. He lunges forward, his blade crackling with a sinister energy. This sword itself glowing with a terrifying purple magic, and Daku is frozen in place, watching his own death approach. This enchanted blade plunges right into Daku's chest as Colin grits his teeth, looking pained as he delivers the final, fatal blow. This monster scoffs, asking if Colin really thought someone like him could deliver the final blow, but Daku yells from the side, reminding Colin that he is still being held hostage over here. His sword at the ready as he makes it clear he is still in this fight too. This defiance just sends the monster into a rage, and in a shocking move, Colin lunges forward and strikes Daku directly, leaving Daku completely stunned as the blade seemingly passes right through him. But it was a feint, as Colin's attack was aimed at the monster standing right behind him. This flashback ends, and we are back to them arguing about how Colin called Daku's last words lame, which kicks off another memory of them fighting together, with Colin yelling at Daku for being reckless, saying he should be thanking him for the save instead of complaining about the method. Daku argues that even if he'd cut the hostage down, their enemies would not have just let them go, and their bickering continues mid-battle, with Colin demanding a signal for surprise attacks. All the while, a crowd of rescued villagers just awkwardly watches the two heroes argue, gossiping about how Daku was just crying for some girl named Erika a minute ago. Back in the present, Daku finally gets back to the point, asking about the hand gesture, and Colin explains it is the sign of the three-legged crow, taught to him by a man named Roan, clarifying it is a signal that will guarantee help from any comrade who sees it. Daku just stares at the sign, processing this new, potentially life-saving piece of information. Then immediately gets sarcastic, asking if Colin plans on getting captured again just to use it. Colin just smirks, saying he learned it from someone specific, but that person is already dead. Colin wraps up his tragic backstory about a sworn brother, leaving Daku completely lost, who is now trying to remember if he ever even knew a guy like that back in his slave days. Their little chat gets cut short when they arrive at the Marquis's chambers and are told to enter. And the two of them walk into a massive hall to present themselves before the head of the house. This Marquis's first concern is for Colin, asking how he is feeling after the incident, and Colin just flashes a confident smile, assuring him he has made a full recovery. Daku, on the other hand, just offers a stiff, formal greeting, clearly a bit on edge. With the pleasantries out of the way, the Marquis's expression turns serious. Explaining he called them here to discuss what went down in the hunting grounds. Daku immediately starts to panic, thinking this is about letting Fried go out without permission. But the Marquis instead starts talking about Glenn and his men, reflecting on their long history, recalling all the life-or-death battles they survived together to get where they are. He admits he cannot even imagine losing them after everything they have been through. And then sincerely thanks Daku and Colin for saving the three knights who survived. Daku looks down, saying he only wishes they'd noticed the danger sooner to save more of them, which seems to hit a nerve with the Marquis, who insists they did nothing wrong and that the failure to predict the attack was his alone. He then pivots, saying he heard about the offer to join the elite knights and wants their answer directly. Colin, without a moment's hesitation, apologizes but once again declines the position, so the Marquis turns his gaze to Daku, asking him for his decision. With Colin's refusal out of the way, the Marquis turns and asks Daku if he wants the spot instead, which sends Daku into a panic, stammering that he is not even an official guard yet and he is visibly struggling with the weight of the offer, completely overwhelmed. Until he finally clenches his fists and shouts that he absolutely wants to be an elite knight. This Marquis seems pleased, then turns his attention back to Colin for any other requests, and Colin gives Daku a subtle look, signaling he has got this handled. He calmly asks for a favor concerning Daku's little sister, Erika, requesting she be transferred from the Williams family over to the Hall family, a move that shocks Daku. Colin explains that the two siblings were together this whole time until they were separated here, adding that she has a weak constitution and Daku desperately wants to be by her side. This Marquis listens to the whole story, then asks if this is truly Colin's wish. Colin frames it as a matter of loyalty, saying he and Daku are comrades who fought together and Daku is just floored, completely moved that Colin would use his one request for him. With a final formal plea, Colin asks the Marquis to please return Daku's sister. This word comrade seems to strike a chord with the old man, who glances at a painting of his own crew. He agrees to the transfer but warns it'll take time, then dismisses Daku from the room. Daku hesitates for a moment, giving Colin a worried look before he finally leaves. Now that they are alone, the Marquis walks toward the window, leaving Colin standing in the massive hall. He then asks Colin if he remembers the day he challenged Suno to a match in the arena, admitting that from that moment on he knew Colin was no ordinary slave. This Marquis admits he was surprised Colin took a magic attack without a scratch, but what really caught his attention was the power he showed against Fried a few days back. That dark, overwhelming energy was definitely not something a normal person has, and he calls bullshit on the whole persecuted noble from Aile's story, pointing out that someone just trying to reclaim their life would not need that kind of power. Realizing the jig is up, Colin addresses the Marquis by his full name, Darius, and summons some impressive crystal magic while trying to play it cool, claiming he is just an ordinary person who can use a little magic. Then smirks, asking if he seems trivial to a Grandmaster-level mage like him. This Marquis is not amused, finding it a little hard to believe an ordinary person can do that. And he cuts right to the chase, demanding to know who Colin really is. So Colin pivots, praising the Marquis as a great lord who values ability over bloodline, drawing his sword to pledge his loyalty to that very ideal, vowing to help eradicate the world's obsession with blood supremacy. He kneels, declaring his ambition to one day become a great lord just like him, and then, with a flash of intensity, shouts that he will ultimately surpass him. Colin reminds the old man he has saved his life twice already, asking for a chance to prove himself, telling the Marquis to judge him based on how he uses his power in the upcoming selection test. This bold declaration actually gets a reaction, with the Marquis looking genuinely intrigued, who then agrees to let him prove it, dismissing Colin with a smirk. Just as Colin is about to take his leave, this Marquis stops him, saying he has one last question. He asks Colin point-blank what he thinks of a man named Roan, a name that clearly does not ring any bells for our boy. Seeing his genuine confusion, the Marquis quickly changes his mind and dismisses him, and after Colin finally exits the Grand Hall, this Marquis turns to someone who has been hiding in the room the whole time, asking for their thoughts. A man named Cornell appears, his body crackling with a familiar purple energy. And he remarks that if Colin is just some ordinary guy, then he is a once-in-a-generation genius. Cornell points out that Colin's reaction proves he does not know Roan, poking a huge hole in his Ale City backstory. He is convinced Colin has some ulterior motive and warns the Marquis to stay on guard. This old man agrees, mentioning there is a precedent for this kind of thing, his eyes drifting to a framed portrait of a red-haired woman. Before they can dwell on it, Cornell is interrupted by an aide, who delivers a message that just arrived via Spirit Cat. This Marquis takes the sealed letter, curious about what new intel his network has dug up. Meanwhile, that very same Spirit Cat is seen returning to Colin's quarters, where Colin reveals he has traded all the spoils the Marquis was holding for him into a mountain of supplies. With all these new potions and materials, he is confident his strength is about to skyrocket. But he is still hung up on that last question, wondering who the hell Roan actually is. Colin mulls over the name Roan, remembering he'd only heard it from Daku in his past life, and the way the Marquis asked about him felt like a test, as if Colin should have known the guy. He mixes one of his new potions, deciding to put the mystery on the back burner for now since grilling Daku about it can wait. Right now, powering up for the selection test is the only thing that matters. So he starts chugging down the first of many mana-boosting concoctions, sitting down with his massive chest of newly acquired alchemical supplies. With a flash of determination, he summons his personal magic tome, which materializes as a glowing book, its pages swirling around him in a vortex of energy. He downs another potion, preparing for the painful process of absorbing all this raw power, then tosses the empty vial aside to get straight to work. Focusing his will on the magical pages floating around the room, he begins to absorb the energy, gritting his teeth through the strain. This power surge is so intense it looks like it is physically tearing at his skin, as raw magic courses through his entire body, pushing him to his absolute limit, until finally the absorption is complete, netting him a grand total of 1 extra mana point. His tome explains the recipe, but even the best potions only grant 3 points with some barely giving 1. Still, he has no choice but to keep chugging, since running out of mana again would mean losing control. He forces down another vial, grimacing at the absolutely foul taste, realizing at this rate he will be at it all night and his stomach might just give out before he is done. Staring at his current mana level of 20, he desperately wonders if there is an easier way to do this. Just as he is about to give up, his tome suggests using the Azure King's core to craft a magic tool, and the idea of forging his own gear immediately grabs his attention. Deciding this sounds way better than chugging more sludge, he gets right to it, channeling his energy into the glowing blue orb. He closes his eyes to focus, preparing for the magical crafting process, which apparently involves summoning a giant golden minotaur with a hammer. Following the tome's instructions, he carefully injects his mana into the core, and now all he has to do is picture the exact item he wants to make. After a quick brainstorm, a perfect idea clicks into place. He holds the core steady, ready to bring his creation to life as the golden spirit smith raises its hammer for the final strike. With a single, earth-shattering blow, the forging begins, sending a massive flash of light blasting out from his window. This residual energy swirls around him as the process finally settles down, leaving behind a newly crafted bracelet on his wrist. This system confirms its stats, a permanent +1 to mana and a special effect called Wild Instinct. He stares at the +1 mana bonus, then glances over at his pile of potions, and a brilliant, time-saving idea suddenly hits him. He chugs one of the low-grade potions, and his mana jumps by 2 points instead of 1. Turns out the bracelet doubles the potion's effect with none of the painful side effects problems solved. Colin's still trying to figure out what this new Wild Instinct ability actually does when suddenly his senses go into complete overdrive and his vision shifts into some kind of energy-detecting mode. He can see the auras of 2 maids through a solid wall, even hearing them complain about being tired, which startles the maids just as much as it confuses him. Realizing he is not seeing through walls but sensing life force, he glances down at the new bracelet and his vision expands, letting him track the entire guard patrol across the estate grounds. He easily picks out the Marquis and Katrina by their powerful blue mana signatures, but then a strange hunger hits him, a feeling that completely catches him off guard. A voice in his head whispers that it is hungry, and he has no idea where it is coming from. His new vision scans the nearby guards, but none of them seem to be the source, and it is definitely not the other patrol either. His focus is then drawn to a specific window in the mansion, sensing an immense power inside, and the bracelet's ability seems to zoom right in on that potent mana. Through the window, he sees Katrina's aura alongside the 2 maids, but just as he is watching, her energy signature turns and stares right back at him, unleashing a massive pulse of psychic force in his direction. This backlash slams directly into Colin's senses, sending him stumbling backward in a wave of pain. He grits his teeth, realizing she actually noticed him spying as expected of someone on her level. Meanwhile, a maid checks on a young woman named Angelica who seems a bit distracted, but Angelica, who is Darius's second daughter, just dismisses Colin's psychic probe as a fly. Back in his room, Colin realizes the hungry voice he heard earlier was not hers at all, so he decides to push his new Wild Instinct ability and expand his search radius. His senses immediately lock onto a desperate plea for help from somewhere far away, and he pinpoints the source to a deep, dark forest, finally finding what he was looking for. As he focuses on the location, he senses an immense and chaotic magic power flaring up. And the volatile purple energy makes it pretty clear he is detecting demons. This scene then cuts to the day of the selection test where all the candidates have gathered. Colin is in the crowd along with Katrina, Cornell, and other familiar faces from the estate. Everyone's attention is focused on the Marquis, who is conducting a knighting ceremony. He brings his sword down on the shoulder of a kneeling man named Dak. And a red-haired noblewoman watches as the Marquis promotes him from his former servant status. She flashes back to when Darius first brought Dak to the estate years ago, remembering how he was used as a brutal example to terrorize the other servants. She also recalls her own son, Freed, using Dak as a personal punching bag, venting his frustrations by pouring wine over the man's wounds while he was tied up. It is a grim reminder of the absolute hell Dak had to survive to get here. But back in the present, the Marquis's voice cuts through the silence, officially recognizing Dak as an elite knight of the Hall family. Colin watches the whole ceremony with a smug little grin as Dak's new brothers-in-arms officially welcome him to the elite knights. Not everyone is celebrating, however. Katrina looks on with pure contempt, muttering to her son about how the lower classes exist only to serve the nobility. In her mind, this is an absolute, unchangeable rule of destiny, which triggers a nasty flashback to how she personally enforces that destiny. A maid is brutally punished by the head servant for a simple mistake, all while Katrina watches the whole ordeal without a shred of emotion. This other servants are frozen in terror, knowing exactly what is coming next, as the poor girl is dragged away, begging for mercy that will never come. She is then forced towards a brazier of burning coals, her eyes wide with horror as a red-hot ladle is brought towards her. And a blood-curdling scream rips through the memory. Back in the present, the Marquis calls out her name, snapping her out of it, just as her eyes land on Dak being happily greeted by a young girl. This Marquis formally asks to speak with her about a certain servant, specifically a girl named Erica from the Williams family he wants to bring here. He then drops the real bomb. It is a promise he made to Colin. This news hits Katrina like a physical blow, leaving her absolutely furious that he'd do so much for a mere monkey. Freed immediately confronts his mother, absolutely furious that she caved to the Marquis's demands, complaining that letting Colin get his way will completely tarnish their family's dignity. But Katrina just calmly reminds him who really lost their dignity by getting beaten by a monkey. Freed tries to make excuses, claiming he was not even going all out in their fight. But his mother completely shuts him down with a single word, unleashing her terrifying aura and telling him it is time to wake the hell up. As her power flares, she screams that he needs to understand his place, reminding him that nobles do not stoop to fighting commoners. This triggers a horrifying vision for Freed where he is suddenly swarmed by servants, all of them brutally attacking him at once in a chaotic mess, and he is completely overwhelmed by the imaginary assault. Katrina's voice cuts through his terror, warning him what will happen if he loses to Colin again, saying they will be dragged down to the very same level as the people they despise. This threat leaves Freed collapsed on the floor. As Katrina explains her actual plan, they are just going to let the monkeys fight it out amongst themselves during the selection. She is well aware of Colin's background as a fallen noble from Ale City. And while she fully intends to stop him, she will let the system do the dirty work for her. This scene then jumps to the day of the test, with a massive crowd and fireworks celebrating the event. People in the stands are already gossiping, and it turns out most of them are here for one reason, to see the kid named Colin who publicly humiliated a Viscount and even beat Freed. Colin tries to get into the Duskkeep Forest to investigate that strange energy he sensed. But the official tells him only candidates and the Lord are allowed in there, basically shutting him down completely for the time being. Back with the other hopefuls, he is still thinking about that plea for help, and the terrifying, inhuman mana signature he detected from the forest, knowing he has to find some way to check it out later. Just then, the Marquis finally makes his grand entrance, and everyone realizes the selection test is about to begin. He addresses the massive crowd of candidates, reminding them that in this family, strength is the only thing that gets you anywhere. He declares that their family creed is simple: whoever wins this battle will earn the right to bear the name Hall. But just as he is about to explain the test, Katrina cuts him off, proposing the victory condition will be to retrieve a family heirloom ring she has hidden. This Marquis looks less than thrilled by the interruption, but seems to go along with it, which flashes back to a private conversation they had about bringing Erica to the estate. He agreed to Katrina's request, letting her have what she wanted, but it turns out there was a price for his cooperation. She demanded the right to decide the rules of the test herself. And back in the present, she reveals her masterstroke: there is only one ring. Katrina reveals her final twist, holding up the ring and declaring there can be only one victor, announcing she will teleport both the prize and all the participants to random locations, and telling them to use any weapons or items they find scattered across the battleground. Colin braces himself on the teleportation circle, ready for the chaos to begin as the Marquis roars, officially kicking off the brutal selection test, and with a single command, he unleashes them all into the arena. While Katrina smirks with satisfaction, Colin's eyes narrow with pure focus. Instantly, dozens of teleportation circles light up across a massive, volcanic island, dropping the candidates into the trial grounds one by one. Colin lands smoothly in a familiar-looking forest, grimly remembering all the suffering he endured in this very place during his past life. Back in the viewing hall, a projection confirms all the challengers have been successfully transferred, and the other nobles and knights settle in to watch the show, some already drinking. This Marquis and Katrina watch from their seats, waiting for the bloodshed to start. Out in the field, one candidate immediately finds a sword lying next to a skeleton, while another one lucks out and grabs a crossbow from a different fallen combatant. Colin is just stretching in a clearing, seemingly unconcerned, when the two newly armed candidates decide to team up and ambush him, this swordsman charging in for the kill, swinging right for Colin's neck. But Colin stops the blade cold with just 2 fingers, smirking at their surprisingly bold attack. This swordsman immediately goes for a finishing blow, but Colin just tells him not to be in such a rush, thinking he really does not have time to waste on these guys. He effortlessly redirects the sword right into a nearby tree, leaving the attacker completely disarmed and wide open. A quick leg sweep sends the guy tumbling to the ground, just as an arrow from the crossbow user zips past his head. This two of them regroup, smugly telling Colin to just give up, convinced he is already finished and promising to make it quick. But Colin just grins, telling them they are the ones who are finished. He calmly tells them to take a good look at their own hands, and the swordsman sees some nasty-looking marks spreading across his skin. Suddenly, they both start freaking out, feeling something moving under their skin, as Colin explains this is what happens when you steal things from other people. He reveals the weapons were cursed with a heart-eating poison bug, which apparently enters the body and wreaks havoc from the inside before moving on to its next unfortunate host. Realizing they are doomed, the two decide to take Colin down with them, but he quickly stops them, saying it is not too late to fix this. He then claims he was also infected by the bugs earlier. He then pulls out a vial, claiming he luckily found an antidote. And with a sly grin, offers them a deal, let him go and the cure is theirs. This swordsman whispers to his partner to just play along for now, and they both agree to his terms, demanding he hand over the medicine. Colin acts hesitant for a moment, looking at the single vial in his hand before casually mentioning there is only one dose available. That little detail immediately shatters their temporary alliance as they both start screaming for the cure, accusing the other of planning a betrayal. Their partnership completely dissolves into a pathetic scuffle, with both of them now begging Colin to save them over their friend. Colin just watches their meltdown with a cold, calculating look, then casually tosses the vial towards the crossbow user who celebrates his victory. But as he reaches out to grab his prize, thanking Colin for his life, this swordsman brutally takes him out of the competition for good. With his former ally down, he snatches the vial from the air and immediately chugs the entire thing down without a second thought. Feeling cured, he turns his blade on Colin, announcing he is next. This guy scoffs at their deal, admitting he will get a reward from the madam for Colin's head. Colin just smirks, saying he knew it all along, then drops the final bomb. The antidote was just some water he found nearby. Colin then reveals the final twist, him being infected was also a lie, it was just some dirt. And the swordsman's face contorts with pure rage, realizing he has been played from the start, so with a scream he lunges forward to take Colin down for good, but the real poison from the cursed sword finally kicks in, stopping him dead in his tracks. Colin just watches calmly as the guy collapses, noting the poison has already done its work. He then explains that this whole area is contaminated with a poison miasma, even telling the dying man to be more careful about stealing things in his next life. With his last breath, the guy threatens that the Williams family will hunt Colin down for this, but Colin just casually slips a ring right off the man's finger, trying it on and calling it a much-appreciated gift for his troubles. He waves goodbye, calling the poison a return gift before walking away from the scene. After leaving the two candidates behind, he continues deeper into the forest. Now cloaked and moving with a clear purpose in mind, his journey leads him to an ominous cave entrance, littered with skeletal remains marked by a demonic-looking skull with glowing green eyes. Colin stops right before it, confirming this is the place he was looking for. He walks past the skeletons and heads straight into the dark passage, accidentally stepping on the hand of one of the fallen figures on the ground. In that instant, its eye sockets flare up with a sinister purple light, and the reanimated skeleton suddenly grabs a hold of his ankle. After leaving the skeleton behind, Colin enters a stone passage that is exactly as he remembers, but he immediately stops short, realizing he is not the only one down here. Deeper inside, a group of armed men has a pink-haired woman surrounded, telling her it is over. With nowhere left to run, she glares back at them, her expression hardening with pure defiance, and refusing to surrender, she charges forward to fight her way out. This leader of the group just scoffs, completely unimpressed by her last stand. She manages to parry the first attack, but the numbers are clearly not on her side, as a heavy blow from a hammer sends her reeling backwards and another attacker's slash catches her completely off guard, sending her crashing to the ground where a boot pins her down. This leader steps forward, demanding to know where someone is, threatening she will end up just like the other bodies scattered around the room. Even beaten, she spits back that she has no idea what he is talking about, and even if she did, she'd never tell scum like them anything. This guy just smirks, deciding to try a different approach, grabbing her by the hair and yanking her head back forcefully. All while Colin watches from the shadows, recognizing them as more trash from the Williams family. This woman winces, her eyes wide with shock from the sudden aggression. This pink-haired woman looks on, completely defeated, while Colin watches from the shadows, initially deciding he'd really rather just avoid any unnecessary trouble down here. But her sudden, desperate scream for help gets his attention, much to his annoyance, and as he steps out, the leader of the thugs immediately demands to know who he is. Colin just tells the guy to relax, putting on a friendly act and saying he is not an enemy. But the leader assumes he is with the Williams family and tells him to back off. This captive woman watches the tense exchange, a single tear rolling down her face as Colin just shrugs and pretends he is about to walk away from the whole situation. Before he can leave, one of the thugs yells for him to wait, noticing something odd, specifically the ring on Colin's finger, which makes him suspicious. This guy then reaches out to grab Colin's hood, demanding to see his face, and yanks it back forcefully while his confused buddies just look on. With the thug now holding him from behind, the others ask what is going on, and Colin coldly explains that while he did not want to get involved, they left him no choice. As he drives a hidden blade right into the man's side with zero hesitation, he kicks the body away, and the others finally recognize him as the great fool from the rumors. Realizing who they are up against, the remaining thugs draw their weapons to kill him. But Colin is already a step ahead, unsheathing his own sword which glows with power. He moves in a flash, delivering a clean strike right across the masked man's throat, and immediately follows up with a brutal kick that sends another attacker flying. With the last two goons down, only their enraged leader is left standing, who glares at Colin, absolutely furious at this unexpected turn of events. But as he lunges forward, he is completely blindsided by an attack from behind. As the pink-haired woman he was just tormenting drives her blade right through him. After the leader collapses, she immediately turns her attention back to Colin, her eyes locking onto him as just another potential threat in the room, and without a moment's hesitation, she charges forward to attack him as well. Colin just calmly prepares to deflect her desperate, exhausted strike, easily redirecting her blade and sending her stumbling right past him. With the last of the thugs now taken care of, the immediate danger is finally over. He gives her a nod, admitting she is pretty skilled for someone in her situation. This woman immediately breaks down, overwhelmed with relief that she actually survived the ordeal before the exhaustion and her injuries finally catch up, causing her to collapse. After a moment, she respectfully covers the bodies of the fallen men, which gets Colin's attention, prompting him to ask a question. He casually asks her why she was fighting with those guys in the first place, and she explains they were relentlessly demanding the location of someone named Colin, but when she told them she did not know, they refused to believe her, taking out everyone else. Colin's face drops as he realizes he is the reason all this happened. Then she looks at him, asking if he is also from the Williams family and why he'd attack his own people. Colin just scoffs, saying he never actually got along with the Williams family to begin with, and that he only joined their selection test to get away from them before trying to leave. But before he can walk away, the pink-haired woman suddenly grabs his wrist, insisting that she can help him with whatever he is doing down here. He glances back at her, completely unimpressed by this sudden offer of an alliance. Colin asks what good someone who was just about to get killed could possibly be. But she fires back that she only panicked because she watched her friends get taken out. Their argument is cut short by a groaning sound from one of the fallen thugs, as the leader they just defeated staggers back to his feet looking anything but human. His eyes suddenly flare up with a sinister purple light, catching them both off guard, and the woman can only stare in absolute shock at what is happening, because the reanimated corpse is now crackling with some kind of dark energy. It lunges forward in an instant, forcing Colin to shove her out of the way, and he meets the attack head-on with a brutal upward strike right through its jaw. Even with a sword clean through its head, the thing just stands there, completely unfazed. Realizing this is bad news, Colin grabs the woman and yells for them to run, but the impaled man just stands there, not reacting to the fatal wound at all. She screams out, asking why it is not dying, while Colin looks on grimly. He explains it is a corpse being controlled by a death puppet worm that will not stop, leaving the woman completely horrified by this absolutely insane revelation. Colin explains these are parasitic monsters that drain their hosts and turn them into walking puppets, and to make matters much, much worse, they are all connected, sharing information with each other like a hive mind, which means every single one of them in this cave now knows exactly where they are. Right on cue, a whole horde of glowing-eyed corpses start shambling out of the darkness, with the reanimated leader they just fought now leading the charge, and the two of them are suddenly completely surrounded by the undead. Colin just sighs, realizing how ridiculously persistent these things are, already trying to figure out how he can ditch this fight and find the hidden passage he came for. This pink-haired woman, however, seems weirdly confident about the whole situation, saying they only seemed scary at first, but she is not afraid anymore, and with her dual blades ready, she figures they cannot lose as long as they do not get infected. Colin then drops another fun fact. The worms can actually copy the abilities of their hosts, but she just waves it off, calling him Mr. Savior, and saying it is fine since their damaged bodies will not be able to use those skills at full power anyway. She properly introduces herself as Luna and asks for his name, so he quickly makes one up, calling himself Clark to keep his real identity under wraps for now. Luna then vows to be the one protecting him this time, planting her swords in the ground and begins to pray, gathering a massive amount of holy energy around her. Colin recognizes her power as an advanced swordswoman as she unleashes her attack to purify the puppets. With her eyes glowing, Luna unleashes a massive wave of holy energy, which absolutely shreds through the first wave of incoming corpses, purifying them instantly in a brilliant flash of light. She strikes a pose, her pure Emperor's Blade technique having cleared the field, and Colin cannot help but admit she has definitely got some serious skill. Meanwhile, a stray puppet tries to sneak up on him from behind, but Colin just casually parries the attack without even breaking a sweat, slicing it down while noting that these trial grounds are not exactly forgiving. Suddenly, his eye flares up as he detects a new source of mana nearby. While Luna continues her whirlwind of destruction through the remaining horde, riding the momentum, she decides to go for the big boss and end this, charging straight for the reanimated leader she'd already taken down once, and she brings her swords down for what should be the final blow, only for the puppet to catch her attack with its bare hand. Luna stares in disbelief as red energy crackles around its fingers. Realizing with horror that this corpse is somehow using magic, it seems impossible, but the leader is now casting some kind of earth spell, causing the ground beneath her to erupt and trap her foot in solid rock. She struggles against the binding, completely caught off guard by this development. As the puppet leader glares back, its stolen powers now fully active. This puppet leader immediately follows up by launching a massive chunk of rock right at Luna, knocking her off her feet and sending her crashing to the ground. And as she looks up, she realizes the situation just got a whole lot worse, because the new puppets shambling forward are her own fallen comrades. She stares in absolute horror, recognizing the faces of her friends, now just walking corpses controlled by the same parasitic worms. While she is frozen in shock, one of the new puppets lunges for Colin, but he reacts instantly, grabbing its head before it can even get close, and takes it down with a clean strike right through the chest. He immediately calls out to Luna, trying to snap her out of it, but it is too late. A strange purple mark is already spreading across her cheek as her former friends swarm and overwhelm her while she is still in shock. They quickly drag her down, leaving her completely defenseless. Colin is about to move in to help, but his eye flares up again, detecting a massive surge of mana from the puppet leader. This thing is channeling some serious power, forming a huge fist of crackling rock and lightning, and Colin realizes with dread that it must have found a mage's body to take over. As the puppet unleashes its devastating attack, he dashes forward to shield Luna, catching her just as she begins to collapse from the impact, and he sees the infection spreading, realizing she is now being controlled by a death puppet worm. Colin stares down the horde, completely unimpressed by the zombie apocalypse unfolding before him, as the puppet army led by their impaled boss prepares to swarm them. He just sighs, calling them a nuisance while holding the now infected Luna, because the leader roars, signaling the entire mob to charge forward, its eyes glowing with that same sinister purple energy as it rushes them. Yeah, fighting a whole army of these things is definitely not on his to-do list. So with a smug grin, he decides it is time to make a strategic exit, and without a second thought, he just turns and bolts, carrying Luna as he dashes away from the pursuing undead horde. He makes a running leap off a cliff, diving into the darkness below, and uses some kind of ice ability to create a massive barrier, blocking off their escape route. After finding a safe spot, he sets Luna down, who is still unconscious from the whole ordeal. She eventually wakes up screaming, completely panicked about the corpses, only to find a knife pressed right against her throat by her supposed savior, who tells her not to move while she just stares back in total confusion. Turns out he is just checking the infection, noting the dark mark still on her face, and realizes that while she has definitely been infected, she is not turning into a puppet. He explains they are on a lower level now where the puppets cannot follow, which leaves Luna wondering where the hell they have even ended up, and Colin just hands her a bowl, telling her to drink whatever's inside. He explains it is a medicinal brew he made to slow down the infection, not cure it, though he is quick to add that he has no idea how much it'll actually help. Luna realizes she is just delaying the inevitable but starts to drink it anyway, and when she hesitates, Colin just grabs the bowl and makes her finish it, forcing her to chug the entire nasty concoction in one go. Suddenly she is all fired up, telling him it is time to move, but he just asks where to. She reminds him the whole point of this test is to find the ring, feeling weirdly optimistic and chalking up her survival to some kind of divine grace. She even offers to act as a decoy to help him escape the puppets, but Colin just shuts that down immediately, telling her he is staying put. Luna is completely confused by his lack of interest in the test's objective. Turns out he already found an exit. Following this stream will lead them right out of the cave. Before they go, however, he asks if she is really capable of taking down her own friends, leaving Luna completely speechless at the incredibly blunt question. She quietly admits that she honestly does not know if she could do it. Luna begins to explain that they were all childhood friends who grew up together, sharing a dream of leaving their small town and making something of themselves. She tearfully explains how they thought this whole test was their one big chance from God, and now she is left wondering why it all had to end with them turning into monsters. Colin notes her dilemma. She wants to free them but cannot bear to be the one to do it. Colin just tells her that crying only proves she is still human, before casually mentioning they are completely out of options anyway. Luna, of course, has no idea what he is talking about, so he explains the death puppet worms have a queen, and if she dies, all her offspring die too. That includes the one currently burrowing into Luna's face, a fact she does not appreciate. He gives her the choice to join him, and she immediately agrees, vowing to keep her promise to protect him. She is all fired up, claiming she is not scared of being a puppet anymore, but Colin cuts her off, saying there is one more little thing she needs to do. If she is coming along, she has to drink the rest of that nasty medicine as a precaution. Luna looks absolutely horrified at the thought of chugging the entire pot, protesting that one cup was already pushing it, but Colin just threatens to leave her behind, which is all the motivation she needs to run back and start drinking. Sometime later, they are navigating a spider-infested tunnel when Colin has to snap her out of a daze. She is starting to have second thoughts, asking if he is absolutely sure this is the right way, and he confirms the queen's lair should be nearby, though Luna's worried about fighting a level 3 monster. Colin has no clue what level 3 means, which completely baffles her. So she has to give him a quick lesson on the Empire's monster ranking system, explaining that level 1s are basically harmless, while level 2 and 3 require actual skill to beat. Colin puts it together, figuring the regular puppets they fought were probably level 2, which leads Luna to guess the boss is a level 3, though she still cannot figure out how it used magic. Colin suggests the worm just took over a noble's body to get its powers, but Luna insists that is impossible since nobles are supposedly protected by God, so he asks if maybe it was not magic, just some other kind of innate monster ability. Which she immediately shuts down, explaining magic is a divine gift marked by a sigil, and that corpse definitely used a magic circle to cast its spell, adding that truly powerful monsters are on a whole other level, like level 4 or 5, and running into one of those is basically a death sentence. Though Colin cheekily remembers he just took down a bunch of them the other day, then he asks what if the official monster rankings are just wrong. Before taking it a step further and asking if maybe her god is the one who messed up, which is absolutely the wrong thing to say to a devout follower, and Luna completely loses it, accusing him of insulting her deity, causing Colin to immediately backpedal with his hands up, apologizing and saying he misspoke just to calm her down, but he is not done poking holes in her worldview just yet, posing a new question. If the worms can use magic, are they God's envoys too? He keeps pressing, suggesting maybe magic is not some exclusive divine gift after all, and that thought completely shatters Luna's composure, leaving her stumbling as she tries to deny the possibility, clinging to the belief that magic is only for God's chosen followers. Colin gives her a pat on the head to snap her out of her faith-based meltdown, telling her she can have her crisis after they have dealt with the puppet queen. He leads the way, but Luna's still confused about where they are going, until he points to a supply cache, claiming this is what they will use to win. Luna immediately recognizes the contents of the barrels as alcohol and then spots a huge pile of charcoal stacked nearby. She realizes his plan is to use fire and immediately shoots it down, insisting there is no way that would ever work against the queen. She argues that a level 3 monster would not even be slowed down by a simple fire. But Colin looks completely unconcerned by her very valid points. He just smirks, saying it is too early to be so sure, and pulls out a small vial. A little while later, they arrive at a massive reinforced door and Colin confirms that the death puppet queen is right on the other side. Luna asks the obvious question, how are they supposed to open it? His answer is equally obvious, they are just gonna smash it, as he pulls out a dagger. Luna scoffs at the idea, knowing a high-grade technique would barely scratch it, but Colin just winds up for a casual swing and completely shatters the heavy doors with a single, effortless blow. She is left absolutely stunned, wondering how he has that kind of power. Beyond the doorway, they find a long hall filled with creepy, pulsating egg sacs. Stepping inside, they find the queen's lair is a long hall lined with pulsating egg sacs. And the floor is littered with the bodies of those who failed this test before them. These guys clearly did not make it out alive, and the whole scene is making Luna extremely uneasy. She nervously asks if this is the right place, so Colin just points forward, revealing a massive armored knight sitting on a throne at the far end of the hall. That is the death puppet queen, and it has already got its eyes on them, immediately mumbling about wanting some fresh meat. Which freaks Luna out, but Colin explains the queen is just speaking through its host. This queen gets to its feet, sword in hand, clearly ready for a fight. Judging by the fancy armor, Luna realizes this host was someone important. This queen raises its massive sword, preparing to unleash a powerful attack, and Colin screams for them to dodge as a huge wave of energy blasts their way. They both get thrown back by the sheer force of the blow. And Colin confirms her suspicion about the host's identity. Turns out the queen is possessing Phoenix Hall, the former strongest swordsman in the Empire. This guy was a prodigy from a powerful family and a candidate to be its next leader. This queen seems to agree with that assessment, deciding it is time to switch to a new body. Turns out this whole trial is a secret domain created by House Hall to choose its next heir. And all the poor souls who died here now wander the land as mindless undead. Luna explains the host was a legendary swordsman from a noble house who, despite his fame, could not use magic, and while people spread rumors about him, no one ever dared to question his skill with a blade. This puppet queen, now fully powered up, raises its massive, corrupted sword, confirming it is the Golden Sword King of House Hall, much to their horror. Colin just asks if it is really that shocking a monster could infect a high-ranking noble, figuring the worm just waited for the guy to be weak and then jumped in when his guard was down, reminding her that at the end of the day, even nobles are just human. With that settled, he declares it is time to send this so-called king to meet his maker, and Luna seems to steal her resolve right alongside him. This queen mocks them from across the hall, asking if they are trembling in fear yet. It summons a whole array of spectral swords, demanding they bow before it, preparing to unleash one of the Sword King's signature techniques. Colin yells for Luna to get ready as the queen unleashes its Bloodshadow blade, sending a devastating barrage of energy slashes hurtling right at them. But Colin's already moving, drawing his own daggers with a smirk, ready to counter with a sword technique of his own. He uses a move called Lost Step, creating multiple afterimages to confuse the enemy, which actually seems to throw the puppet queen off for a second. It quickly identifies the real Colin among the illusions and swings to intercept him, shattering his dagger with a single blow and calling his attempt pathetic. This puppet queen scoffs that his little tricks are useless after shattering his blade, and while Luna is busy praying for divine intervention, it turns its attention to her. She bravely charges forward with her own sword technique, hoping to land a hit. But the queen just casually bats her attack aside, calling her way too slow. Luna is completely stunned by the sheer difference in their speed and power, and a single kick sends her flying across the room, taking her out of the fight. With her out of the way, the queen focuses back on Colin, who is still on the ground, but he just gives a determined look, readying his other dagger for another go. This time, he launches himself forward with a powerful spinning slash. And the queen moves to intercept, expecting another easy block. To its surprise, Colin actually manages to parry the massive sword, stopping it cold. This queen is genuinely impressed, noting his reflexes and tough body before declaring that Colin would make the perfect new host for it. Colin just smirks back, completely unfazed by the creepy proposal, then suddenly leaps backward, creating distance as the queen looks on, confused. Thinking he is just running, the queen prepares to strike him down for good, but it suddenly notices something glistening on its armor, realizing with a shock that it has been splashed with alcohol. In that instant, a massive explosion engulfs the armored knight, and now on fire, it wonders what kind of sword technique this is as Colin holds up the empty vial. Colin explains his technique is not about swordsmanship, but about overwhelming the enemy. This puppet queen roars from inside the inferno, realizing its host body is starting to fail, and it has absolutely no idea what kind of attack this is, which sends Colin flashing back to his previous life in a resistance camp. He remembers his old comrade examining the vials, noting the strange mix in the alcohol. Turns out one of their craftsmen had added something called spark stones to the concoction, explaining that crushing the stones makes the mixture highly explosive on impact. This old man demonstrated its power, a trick learned from his dangerous mining days under the nobles. He bitterly recalled how many workers died perfecting the mix, all for nobles who promised rewards, only to abandon them the second real monsters showed up. But he was confident this weapon, born from their suffering, would work even on the toughest demons. He called it the pride of a mine worker, a tool of the common man. His comrade had asked what they should even call this new creation. And back in the present, Colin reveals the name he chose. He pulls out more vials, calling his little firebombs Heaven's Punishment. Another one goes flying, erupting in an even bigger explosion. This queen is genuinely shocked by the sheer force of the blast, but it is not down yet, stepping through the flames with its sword ready. Just then, Luna rushes in, declaring they are not just helpless larvae for it to crush. Colin calmly explains the mother bug's weakness. It stays in the nest to protect its young. Colin tosses Luna a vial, telling her to take out the larvae while he keeps the queen busy, and as the monster roars in the flames, she gets right to work on the nest. This creepy egg sacs on the floor immediately start to shrivel and burn away, which seems to restore Luna's resolve, declaring they have to win this for her god. Meanwhile, the queen is absolutely livid that they are targeting its children, screaming in rage as its armor continues to smolder from the explosions. But at that moment, Colin's eyes glow as he detects a sudden surge of mana, watching as the queen's massive sword begins to radiate a fiery energy. It swings the flaming blade, vowing to burn them both down to the bone, leaving them both completely stunned, since the Sword King could not use magic. This queen unleashes a massive burst of fire, screaming the name of its technique. And the entire hall is engulfed in a devastating fiery shockwave. It stands menacingly in the inferno, preparing to go on the offensive, sprouting wings of pure flame as it launches itself straight at Colin. With a single brutal slash, it sends him flying across the room, calling him naive. Colin grits his teeth through the pain, noticing something very strange about its mana. A quick scan reveals the truth. Its magic talent is rock bottom, but its swordsmanship is king class. He is shocked that this much power is coming from beginner-level magic and yells for Luna to act now. She is already moving, charging forward with her own sword technique fully powered up, unleashing a massive wave of divine energy right at the distracted puppet queen. Luna's divine energy slams into the queen, and she is confident that with its defenses down it is finished, but the puppet queen just smirks back, completely unfazed by the holy attack. As its armor begins to crack and fall apart under the combined assault, it mocks them from within the flames, asking if they seriously think this is a victory, and suddenly its entire body begins to split apart at the seams. Luna is completely stunned by this bizarre development, and even Colin admits he has never seen a technique like this before. This single queen multiplies into an entire squad of armored knights surrounding Luna instantly. Colin screams for her to watch out, but a clone is already behind him, telling him to worry about himself. He reacts instantly, using a frozen ice technique to form a shield and block the surprise attack, but the clone's sword shatters the ice barrier with absolute ease, sending shards flying and knocking Colin completely off balance. He can only watch in disbelief as the multiple queens loom over them, declaring that the Golden Sword King is effectively immortal. They boast that no matter how many times he falls, he will just get right back up, preparing to unleash another Bloodshadow blade to finish them off for good. But just as they are about to strike, the main queen's head twitches, spotting an ice clone of Colin standing off to the side. It realizes Luna is with the clone, questioning if they are trying to run, and crushes the ice decoy's head, wondering if the two of them actually manage to escape. This queen unleashes its ultimate fire technique, a massive area of effect blast which absolutely engulfs the entire hall in a devastating explosion. Colin just barely manages to shield Luna from the worst of the impact, taking the hit himself, and he is left wondering how it can regenerate, restore its armor, and even split apart. Realizing this is way beyond the beginner-level magic he initially detected, Luna is clearly in bad shape, coughing up blood from the shockwave. And though she says she is okay, she is barely able to stand on her own. She apologizes for not being more help, feeling like a burden in the fight, but Colin blames himself for thinking his firebombs alone would be enough to win. He sees the corruption spreading on her face, knowing they are running out of time, telling her to stay put and rest while he finishes the fight alone. Of course, Luna refuses, determined to fight alongside him no matter what. But at that moment, something huge crashes down from the ceiling right near them. They both look up, completely caught off guard by the sudden arrival as the puppet queen lands, mocking them for thinking they could actually escape. It calls them utterly foolish, its armor still cracking but its power as strong as ever, landing with a thud and calling Colin a persistent little parasite. Colin, however, just gives it a confident smirk, not intimidated in the slightest. Which is when the queen notices he has brought some friends along, an army of skeletons. With a renewed fury, the queen promises that this time it'll make sure he dies for good. With the skeleton army charging in to avenge their fallen leader, the puppet queen prepares for another round, but Colin is already casting, quickly forming a shard of ice in his hands, unleashing a massive ice wall to block the queen's path, which it shatters with a single swing of its flaming sword. Colin realizes it is using the steam from the melted ice to conceal its approach, and he quickly tells Luna to get clear while he holds it off, but she suddenly grabs him, completely frozen in place. He is totally confused, having no idea why she has stopped moving, and Luna can only apologize, admitting she cannot think or control her body anymore. Turns out, the queen is controlling death puppet worms that have latched onto her, paralyzing her from within. This monster gloats that her medicine is only prolonging her suffering, demanding they bow before it as it charges in for the final blow. It is absolutely certain of its victory, closing the distance in an instant, but Luna uses her last ounce of will to shove Colin out of the way, taking the hit herself. As Colin hits the ground, he remembers the look on the original Sword King's face, giving him an idea, and he unleashes a brand new technique, a strange purple energy that erupts from his hands, instantly ensnaring the queen in a sticky, web-like trap. He tells the struggling knight that this technique will drain away all its pain and torment as the webs begin to pull the very life force from its armored body. Colin just smirks, promising to drain every last drop of its blood too. As the webs drain the armor, the true monster finally emerges, a spider queen gloating about escaping her shell. Meanwhile, outside the labyrinth, the other knights are getting worried about how long this test is taking, and one of them asks if Colin is even safe since a barrier is blocking their view of the inside. But the purple-haired girl scoffs, completely certain he is fine, insisting Colin can handle any enemy in there without breaking a sweat. Her comrade does not look so convinced, though, muttering about her blind confidence, hoping she is right but clearly having his doubts about the situation. Back in the fight, the Spider Queen looms over a cocooned Luna, telling her to be honored to become part of its plan as it prepares to consume her whole, promising her sacrifice will bring prosperity to its entire clan. This monster gets ready to feast, its eyes glowing with hunger, but the cocooned Luna just smirks, saying she is about to ruin its big moment. With a sudden burst of energy, she shatters the webbing, much to the queen's shock, and lands a solid hit, declaring the monster's clan is officially finished. This queen is completely baffled, demanding to know why Luna is not under its control anymore, and Luna coldly explains she was just pretending to be paralyzed the whole time. Turns out the entire act was a setup to lure the real monster out of the Sword King's body. This queen is absolutely floored by the reveal, realizing she walked right into their trap. As Luna unleashes her ultimate sword art, the 100 rending slashes right at the exposed monster. Luna's attack connects, a whirlwind of slashes tearing right into the Spider Queen, completely overwhelming the monster with the sheer force of her technique, and the queen screams about being deceived again by cowardly humans. Even as she is being torn apart, she tries to boast about being immortal right before Colin grabs her. He just smirks, telling her that if she were truly immortal, he would not have stood a chance, and with a cold look he tells her to stop pretending and face reality, calling her nothing more than a fake piece of trash. He finishes the thought, calling her a parasite as he drives his blade straight into her head. This queen lets out a final gurgling scream as the attack lands true, and her body explodes in a shower of green energy that washes over the entire hall. This strange energy seems to dissolve all the remaining skeletons and monster corpses, leaving Luna completely splattered with the disgusting aftermath, and she is clearly grossed out by the whole ordeal, trying to shake it off. Thankfully, the corruption marks on her face finally begin to fade away, though Colin looks a little worse for wear himself, still covered in the monster's remains, but Luna just cheekily asks if her acting was useful, now that the fight's over. He is a bit flustered by her question and just tells her they need to get moving, leading them down a long corridor toward the back of the building. They arrive at what looks like a dead end, but Colin insists there is a hidden room there. Luna is confused since the mother worm is gone and the parasite inside her vanished too, so why go deeper? Colin calmly explains they are going deeper to pass the selection test, obviously, and Luna is completely baffled by what that is supposed to mean. As he pushes open a hidden stone panel at the end of the hall, revealing a room filled with a blindingly bright golden light, He tells her the real key to passing this trial is hidden in here, which does not exactly clear things up for his confused companion. They step inside only to find themselves in a massive treasure vault, absolutely overflowing with mountains of gold, jewels, and priceless artifacts. Luna is completely stunned by the sheer amount of wealth in front of her. While Colin explains this is not just a trial ground, it is the family's secret stash. He remembers finding this place by accident in his past life, but he was too beat up to pass the test back then. This time, he finds a scroll among the treasures, a map of the Duskdeep Forest, and he notices some strange markings on it, including a sword and a magic circle. A plan starts to form in his head as he stares at the map. Connecting the dots between the massive mana he felt and a strange voice he heard earlier, he realizes there's a major secret hidden in that forest, and he needs to pass this test to investigate. While looking around, his eyes land on something that does not quite belong, a plain, unassuming cloth pouch sitting right on top of a pile of gold coins. He picks up the simple bag, looking at it with a bit of suspicion, and suddenly it erupts with a powerful blue magical aura. This pouch turns out to be a magic tool, a pocket dimension that can store anything inside, and as Colin realizes it is an endless pouch, the gears in his head start turning, which means he can just take this entire treasure hoard with him, a truly devious plan. Luna, however, completely misreads the situation, thinking he has found the key to the test, and she starts frantically searching the room, yelling that she cannot find the ring anywhere. Colin just looks on, a little exasperated by her one-track mind, before calmly pointing out that he never said the ring was actually in this room. Instead, he tells her to gather a few nice-looking gems that shine brightly, promising to explain soon, and though Luna is completely confused, she does as she is told, returning with a handful of colorful crystals, still wondering how this helps them pass. When he asks if something's wrong, she just nervously brushes it off. Asking what the plan is now that they are leaving the treasure vault behind, he tells her the obvious next step is to go find the ring, leading them back into the labyrinth, and when she asks if he knows where it is, he makes a weird joke about it not being a club. He then gives her a confident smirk, saying he knows a professional who can find it for them, leaving Luna to wonder who this mysterious expert could possibly be. This scene then cuts to Colin out in a forest, slamming his hand on the ground to activate a technique, as he tries to summon spectral swordsmen, clearly practicing a new skill. But he seems frustrated with the results, admitting that this attempt is not right either because no matter how hard he concentrates, he just cannot seem to recreate that golden sword. Colin recalls the legend of the original Sword King, a noble with zero magic talent. And while looking through a magic tome, he realizes it is full of high-tier spells, which means the Sword King should not have been able to use any of this stuff. He compares his own sword energy clone to the king's golden afterimage, admitting his version is a pale imitation and wondering what the hell the trick was. His attention then shifts to the infinite sack he snagged from the vault, which has a special effect that needs a mark of fresh blood to be activated. He grimaces at the thought that it might want him to feed it his own blood. But then a sudden realization hits him like a truck, connecting the idea of feeding something blood to that golden sword technique. With a new theory in mind, he activates a magic circle on the ground, channeling a strange purple energy directly into his sword, his eyes glowing with focus as he prepares to test his idea, only to be interrupted by someone approaching from behind. It is Luna waving a torch and calling out to him as Mr. Clark. He turns, asking if she managed to handle that little errand he gave her, and she proudly confirms that she placed all the gems exactly where he told her to. When she asks what he was just doing, he brushes it off as simple sword training, though he looks a little nervous as he says it, trying to play it cool by saying the answer should be obvious just by looking. Luna is still skeptical, asking if his so-called professional is really out in this forest, when a sudden noise from the bushes makes her jump back in alarm, but Colin just smirks, completely unfazed by whatever's lurking in the dark, muttering "Speak of the devil" as he casually takes her torch and hurls it into the trees, revealing their mysterious guest. This torchlight lands on a tiny, angry-looking pig with glowing red eyes and crystal hooves, leaving Luna completely baffled that this is their ring-finding expert. This creature is a gem pig, a monster known for its habit of digging up treasure, and now they have got the little guy cornered by a small campfire. Suddenly, Luna has a flash of realization, remembering where she has heard of this thing, recalling that they are legendary monsters that can sniff out buried valuables but are incredibly rare. She is amazed they actually found one and tries to get a closer look, only for the tiny pig to hiss aggressively, making her flinch back. She admits they are lucky to have found it so easily, though Colin notes luring it was not simple, and he reflects that this is still way better than how things went in his past life. Luna, still not convinced, asks if he is really going to trust this little guy to find the ring, and Colin confirms it, kneeling down to get on the pig's level. He calmly tells the creature he is not an enemy and just wants to make a deal, promising to release it immediately if it helps them with their task, before offering it a bag full of gems, saying he is not asking for its help for free. This gem pig's eyes practically turn into jewels at the sight of Colin's bribe, and he explains this is just a fraction of the treasure they looted from the monster's nest, offering the little guy a generous 10% cut if it helps them find the ring. But the pig just glares back, looking completely unimpressed by his lowball offer, before snatching a gem right out of his hand to personally test the quality, leaving Colin sweating a little as he waits for the verdict, only for the pig to spit the gems back out, clearly demanding a better deal. Colin absolutely loses it, yelling that the pig wants half of the treasure they risked their lives for, and he tries to haggle it down to 20%, insisting that is his final offer. This pig just gives him a smug little look, completely seeing through his bluff. Before spitting the gems out one last time, which is apparently its way of saying yes, leaving Colin to wonder if he actually just got played by a monster pig. With the deal accepted, the pig stomps its crystal hoof, ready to get to work, and immediately scrambles up Colin's leg like he is a tree perching right on his shoulder as Colin turns to Luna for the next step. He asks if she remembers what the ring looked like, and she confirms she does. So he tells her to let the pig sniff her memories right from her head. Luna is not having it, telling him to let the pig smell his asterisk head instead, but Colin nervously admits he forgot, realizing it'd be bad if it smelled his past life. So a very annoyed Luna reluctantly offers her head, figuring there is no other choice. Luna looks deeply uncomfortable as the gem pig sniffs her memories right out of her head, and after getting the scent, the little monster looks like it is ready for business. With a sudden grunt, the pig hits the ground and immediately bolts off into the dark forest at an incredible speed. Colin and Luna can only watch as their little guide disappears into the trees. This pig expertly navigates the terrain, leaping from branch to branch with surprising agility, and watching its path, Colin suddenly understands exactly where it is headed, because the ring is not just buried, it is hidden somewhere in a volcanic hellscape.